Hello, hello. Welcome. That stuff. There we go. It is a new year. It's been a while. I'm sorry, everyone, for being gone. Um, you know, went to Wisconsin. I was in Wisconsin, for a couple weeks. So with the in-laws. So, um, I'm sorry that I wasn't able to stream. I know I know this is a good way to spend Sunday night. Let's do it. So let's talk about. I'm just looking at some of the before comments. Some of them are kind of funny. Pressing back from vacation. Let's celebrate. Um, I'll get to the super chat about Stannis and Shireen. Um, but first, let's talk about. Oh, this is an interesting one. Um, I'll answer this really quick. He said, by the way, did Stannis and Robert remember Rael Targaryen? Keep in mind that George sometimes writes stuff and just like doesn't really think things through. But like Rael Targaryen was Stannis and Robert's grandmother, and so and there's no reason that now keep in mind their grandfather Ormond died in the Nine Penny Kings War, um, and Stefan became Lord. Like their dad Stefan became Lord really fast, but there's no reason that like Rail wouldn't be around like as like dowager, and so like when Robert becomes this like super big Targaryen hater, it doesn't really square considering that like his dear old grandma is a Targaryen. So he should at least have like some idea that like not all Targaryens are horrible because his grandma who has no reason not to be hanging out at Storm's End like would be there. So it's just kind of an oversight. So the only thing we can say is like, well, I guess Rail died early or something. So Robert didn't have that feeling. But it's just one of those things that clearly George didn't think about it. Like clearly, but like I hate all Targaryens. Isn't your grandma? Isn't your grandma Targaryen? And like wouldn't she be hanging out, and since your dad and like granddad died, like wouldn't she be a bigger part of your life? Like no, forget it. Anyway, let's talk about Stannis and the let's talk about everybody loves Stannis. Let's talk about Stannis. We've been all waiting and loving this like Battle of Ice um uh, cliffhanger for years now. It's been it's been 13 years, 13 years that we've been thinking about the Battle of Ice. Now, um, when now a lot of people, when we talk about the Battle of Ice, a lot of people think about and they talk about something called the night lamp theory, which is a can't use invention, and which for the most part, it the basic premise of that is that uh, you have the Crofters village where Stannis is, and he thinks he has the high ground. He says he has the high ground, and so as the phrase come in to attack, like what high ground does he have? Like what is the advantage of that Crofters village? Now, one of the things that I think a lot of people caught, I certainly thought of this on first read. Like when reading the chapters for the first time, I was like, why is there so much attention given to the holes in the lake? Like why are they digging these holes in the lake, and why how much attention is given to that? And also because there's an earlier part where people fall in water from crossing a stream, and somebody gets cold and dies and stuff like this. So there's this. Even on first read, I was set up to this idea of like, oh, someone's going to fall in the lake. Someone's going to fall in the lake. And so Can't Use takes that idea too, because I really thought, yeah, they're going to march. Somebody's going to march over the lake and they're going to fall into those holes. And so Can't Use came up with this idea that, well, okay, well, what if he because they have a copy of a map, the Maester, the traitor Maester from Karstark sent a message to Roose that they have this map, and so they think that there's going to be this light at the Crofters' village, and they can just march towards this light, and he can put out that light and maybe do something like either pull out his sword, which makes light, or start the weirwood on fire at the island in the middle of the lake. All the soldiers marching will see that light, thinking it's the Crofters' tower, start walking towards it, fall into the lake. And for the most part, like, the minute this theory kind of came out, like, fans were just like, yeah, that just totally makes sense. That just totally makes sense. Like, the story's been set up that Stannis has all this disadvantage. This seems to make sense on how he would win. And they call it the night lamp because the idea would be that it parallels the Davos chapter where he starts talking to when he's on the sisters, and they talk about the technique of turning out the lighthouse so that ships crash. So this idea that everything has been set up that way. Now, I have been told several times by fans who actually go ice fishing that no, that would totally not work. Like, that's stupid. Like, when you dig a hole in the ice, like, it freezes within a matter of hours. Like, in fact, when you go ice fishing, like, you have to recut the holes, sometimes several times, because the holes refreeze. And that there's no way, considering how cold it was described, that those holes wouldn't have already been, like, refrozen. And it's like, fair enough. Okay, I accept the truth of the world. But did George R. R. Martin think about that? Or does he think that, like, the ice is going to be weak and they're all going to break through? And so there's this, like, idea of, like, what George R. R. Martin knows about versus the truth. Because it does really seem, I mean, on first read, I thought about those holes. Like, and everybody else, like, went online as, like, when I first joined the community, and everybody was talking, oh yeah, those holes. And I was like, well, I'm not the only one, you know? And so it's kind of funny, but that's the basics of the night lamp. So the advantages he has is he can turn out this light of this tower. He can shift the focus. He has the holes on the lake, and maybe, you know, people fall in. And then, but there's more advantages though that people talk about. And so that's not the only one. So another advantage and the thing is there's so many advantages that fans have talked about that not all of them are really compatible. So some people talk about, well, if the Freys fall into the water, Stannis could steal their uniforms and then put them on those own soldiers and then march them inside Winterfell as a technique to take over. You know, essentially what the Brave Companions did. You know, they were brought in and then killed everybody on the inside, you know, pretending to be Lannister supporters, but they had switched and were now Stark supporters and went into Harrenhal and took over that way. That's certainly something could happen. And then there's talk about there's been a lot of snow, and one of the reasons that Theon did not die when he jumped off the walls of Winterfell is that actually the snowdrifts were so high that his fall was not as far. And so when people talk about the impregnable walls of Winterfell and how no one could possibly get over them, well, they're really talking about, like, when there's not that much snow. And so the idea is that perhaps the walls aren't really that high, and that someone could actually perhaps scale them or have a siege engine, like, reach the top and scale the walls that way. And obviously that's not really compatible with the sneaking in idea, but nonetheless, that's another weakness that Winterfell has, is that, yeah, one can cross the wall, get over the walls easier. Another thing is of course all the conspiracies that could be happening on the inside of Winterfell. You've got these Umber. Half the Umbers supposedly are in there, and it's the old Umbers, while the young Umbers on the outside. And originally, when I first joined the community, I read about Bron Voss's analysis, and his big thing was, okay, the young Umbers are on the outside, the Green Boys, and the old Umbers are on the inside. And realistically, if you're really talking about the survival of your house and you're going to have a group do suicidal actions, you'd want the old people doing the suicidal action, not the young people. And that completely makes sense, and it parallels what they talk about the old people getting sent out of the village, to die, to save food for the young people. That all made sense, but then in the Theon sample chapter, or not the Theon sample chapter, the Asha fragment comes out, and you find that, like, no, in fact, like, Mors got killed. Like, those Green Boys really did. Like, when Stannis says in the Theon chapter that the Green Boys won't last very long, like, originally it's just like, well, the Green Boys will probably just run away and there wouldn't be a battle. Like, why would Mors sacrifice himself? But then the Asha fragment comes out, and you're like, no, Mors sacrificed himself. He's dead. Oh, so the Green Boys just all got slaughtered? Like, that was really dumb of the Umbers. Like, because Bran Voss's logic is perfect. Like, yeah, why would you ever put your Green Boys, the future of your house, in harm's way when you have these graybeards that can do something crazy? And now we just have the graybeards left. So, well, I mean, assuming that the Green Boys got slaughtered, but the idea is that Hothor, because we have the Manderly Umber alliance that was established in A Clash of Kings, that there would be that they could do some crazy action on the inside and start killing people, open doors, whatever. And so another thing that so let's see, we talked about Stannis's blinding sword. People don't really have that factor. Stannis's blinding sword, not his blinding sword, but the blinding sun was Stannis's original idea for taking out Renly. Not a great strategy, really. Stannis was being an idiot and got super lucky that a shadow baby happened. But his whole plan was, all right, well, it'll be dawn and they'll be charging and they'll be blind. And so we just break the van. And then if the van gets broken, everybody else will break and I'll win that way. It was really dumb strategy, but nonetheless, his strategy was based on blinding his opponent. So this idea that the new army would be coming in, he could blind them by taking out his sword, could be something, obviously when we're talking about like Umbers and Manderleys, there's also the Manderley ships, the Umber Manderley ships that have been getting built for books and books. These are absolutely positively 100% going to be a thing, brought back later. They've been mentioned far too many times. They're throughout the story, even and in notes and everything. When we talk about like the fray, like G. Steph's like looking at the Cushing Library and the earlier draft being the phrase heading north by ship, and Pycelle warning them that, oh no, like what if some naval force takes them out. You're like, okay, well, it was right there. So we know those ships are coming. So we know that the Umbers and Manderleys have this hidden fleet. And then this idea that like Manderley didn't bring very many people to the wedding. He brought 300 knights and that's it. And, White Harbor is the most populous city in the north. He should have a lot more people than 300. So he should have thousands, a couple thousand soldiers or something, and on these ships to do something. So, and then the final couple things, there's two more things. Obviously, the freaking Ironborn, the Dagmar Cleftjaw has just been ignored. He keeps getting mentioned. He's got to do something. Torrance Square is not very far if you look on a map, not very far, and they can do so much. I mean, or maybe they just want to use Torrance Square and send him off to conquer the other locations in the north quickly, but he's this wild card that has to be brought back. I don't think it really makes sense that Wex did not go to Torrance Square and talk to Dagmar. I think that would be, I mean, the only possibility of that happening is author error, which author error is a thing, obviously. So it's, but it's silly. It's silly that Wex would not go to Torrance Square. And so when Wex shows up in White Harbor, it seems like that has to be some sort of communication with Dagmar Cleftjaw and the Ironborn. And they're obviously an issue. And then there is, on the final thing that Stannis has going for him, I think, besides magic, because obviously there's magic, but the final thing I would say is possibly the wildlings from the wall if the timelines are being screwy. I call it my worst video, but my worst video is called The Timing of the Stab. It is a confusing mess, but I do think that the premise of it is intriguing in that if the Jon chapter happens 3 weeks before the Battle of Ice, you have enough time for wildlings to head south and join into the battle. Now, given all of these advantages and kind of the fan canon that Stannis is going to win, it came, I think, all of us quite a shock when Stannis was just like killed in a whimper in the show. And so there is always that thought that, and Stannis's arrogance in the Theon Sample chapter, of course, like makes us wonder if like somehow Stannis will lose. So I think a lot of people kind of believe that like Stannis will win and then Stannis will lose and stuff like that. So, all right, let's get back to chats. Okay. All right. So, hey, Preston, who do you think Stannis would want Shireen betrothed and married to if she were his long-term heir and he won the throne? I mean, obviously Shireen is his long-term heir. Stannis has never spoken of anybody else but Shireen. The thing about Stannis, we get this discussion in the prologue of The Clash of Kings. Stannis and Cresson brings forward a very smart option because Cresson's a smart dude, and he says that she should marry Sweet Robin. And Stannis, even though Sweet Robin would be a freaking great choice, Stannis says, "Oh, the boy's a weakling," and so Stannis is obviously being Lord of the Vale and bringing that army is of course like insanely smart move. But that would have like done everything for Stannis, but Sweet Robin's a weakling. And so in a sense, like Stannis is still thinking about like the quality of a leader and who's good enough for his daughter. In that sense, I don't think he cares about, for instance, her happiness, but I think he means in like a house strength, kind of manner. And so if we're really thinking about like who, Stannis would want, before Robb died, I'm sure he would have been like, fine, Robb Stark, Willis Tyrell. Like that's the thing is they would have to have a position as strong as, and bring an army, as much as Sweet Robin, but would be, on the same level as Shireen, but also be a strong person, So I think he might be happy with someone. He might be happy with someone like Quentin Martell, Tristan, maybe Tristan, but these people are obviously Quentin. Tristan was betrothed, but obviously and already already on paper Lannister supporter, right? Willis Tyrell, he might not trust the Tyrells or whatever because of the past, and so you kind of start running out of people, right? So I mean, Edmure, if Edmure had more of an army, and that's the thing, you'd be like, oh, but all these age differences. I don't think Stannis would care about that. I don't think Stannis would care about the age differences. He'd just be like, who's a strong guy, who's a strong leader, and who brings an army, you know? Is there a high tower, a high tower? Obviously, all the heirs are married with the high towers, but he would want somebody. He would want somebody like that, where that would bring an army who would be a strong leader. Now, had Sweet Robin died, he probably would have gone Harry the Heir right there, But and the other thing is like Selyse would have to agree to it, stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's the kind of the usual suspects, would bring things in, but they would have to bring a significant army, and they would have to be a strong individual. So we're looking at a Stark, we're looking at a high tower, a Tyrell, a Martell, maybe an Ironwood. Maybe you could get an Ironwood. It's got to be like the number 1 and number 2 house, right? To bring it. I'm actually trying to think, like, why didn't Stannis offer Jon to Shireen for Lord of Winterfell? But this, his whole thing was bringing in the wildlings. Like, the most important thing was actually the wildlings. The thing is, if there was a strong enough wildling king that actually like controlled all of the wildlings, Stannis might be willing to even marry. Selyse would be against it, probably. Probably, The problem is you got to get his wife on board too. Anyway, so there's not many choices. He's one of these guys that would Stannis Baratheon is one of these guys that would never be part of a club that would have him as a member. Like, he thinks he's better than everybody else. So, all right. So now it's 2024. Can we have the gluten-free spaghetti pasta stream now? We'll be super chatty until you do this. I know. I'm sorry I haven't made it. I'll try to get it next week. Jesus Christ. This damn spaghetti thing. People want to watch me eat on stream, because all the streamers, like, because they stream like 8 hours at a time, you see them eating all the time. And so it's such a huge thing. So, so I don't think I've ever eaten very much on stream. Will Preston live long enough to finish Wins? I think so. I hope so. I mean, hopefully the real Wins will come out. But I mean, Wins, we're like about 6 years away on Wins. A quarter done. Working on it. It's doing okay. Sometimes I just look at the table of contents of it and I'm just like, what a great accomplishment. You kind of look. Let's see here. I know it's been 2023 was not quite as fast as 2022 with regards to Wins chapters, like fanfic Wins chapters. However, I think the chapters we did were really good. I think they were like really, really high quality. And why is this not? Screw it. It's like, oh, there we go. Sometimes I look at this. Sometimes I look at this table of contents and I'm just like, look how far we are. Boy in the Pyramid, coming sometime soon. The Quentin chapter. The Quentin chapter is coming, relatively soon. And probably next week I'm gonna do a call for Tyrion 3. Because over break I outlined like what I want in it. It took a while, and then I gave the outline to Carmine. I was like, "What do you think?" And he's like, He's like, okay, that's Carmine he actually really liked it. He's like, that's a good outline. That's I like that ending. I was like, yeah, okay, all right. So pretty pretty good. All right. Is it true that the character of Ali of Bravos is based on Mariah Carey? Really? Who said Ali of Bravos is based on Mariah Carey? I've never heard that. I don't see anything on this, but that would be something. I would love to I'd love to have confirmation on that. I mean, Mariah Carey, incredible voice, Ali of Bravos, the best in the world. I mean, this thing, start asking like who's the best singer um alive, or best pop singer. I mean, obviously the best singer is probably some like opera singer or something, whatever. um Hey Preston, I've missed you. Now I can actually start asking you to read Umineko every week. Oh, Umineko, when they cry. 18 people secluded on an island for 2 days. Mysterious murders. Oh, this is a. Oh, is this a video game? No, it's a novel series. I don't know. I always put all my anime and stuff through the Carmine filter because he's already read and seen everything, and so it's um kidding. So some other random things are funny. Just read Dune for the first time since the second movie is coming out a couple months ago. Frank Herbert knows how to write a good book. Super exciting all the way through. Yeah, you know, a lot of people the Dune enthusiasts say that like you have to really read Dune Messiah and accept Dune Messiah as like the real extension of Dune. Because when you read Dune by itself, it seems like such a feel good hero story. And Dune Messiah needs to kind of temper that. And, but at the same time, everybody lists Dune Messiah as like their least favorite. But even though it's like the most significantly important one. And then, and then I don't know. After that, like I think the super fans like really like God Emperor, and then, but I think they are kind of in a different writing style. Like he spent a lot of time on Dune, and it's a little bit of different writing style as the others. Um, I would love the alt story where Jon accepts Stannis' offer of Winterfell, to have him reliant on Stannis' victory, to not be branded as deserter, and to have him protect Shireen. Well, I think he would be still seen as a deserter if he accepted Stannis' victory. Um, it's I mean, the whole thing at the Wall is that Alistair Thorne is, and Janis Slynt's arrival, you know, tips the Night's Watch to being really pro Lannister, and you kind of forget about him because what they send 100 or 150 people, the pro Lannister men, to join the Watch, and we don't really hear about them, but they're there. 100, 150. This is like the Qyburn Cersei plan. You know, it's a like. I mean, it's not yet a drop. It's kind of a dropped plot, but it's not yet a dropped plot. You know, um, because like there's a possibility that all of those pro Lannisters were stuck at Eastwatch or something. But I don't know why they weren't following Janis Slynt, because Janis Slynt arrives. You know, um, and so it's. But theoretically, had those men joined, you know, it does really tip the scales of the Night's Watch, thinking that Stannis is going to lose. Like, they're just looking at Stannis's like meager army that's based on wildlings, and they're sitting there going, dude, this no, of course the Lannisters are gonna win, and so I think that no matter what Jon does, I mean, A Dance with Dragons does give a dozen very legitimate reasons to hate Jon Snow. But at the same time, like, all the people were kind of against Jon Snow to start. So, I mean, the fact that he wasn't actually even like killed earlier. I guess they really wanted, there was a lot of people that were just, I guess they hadn't quite tipped the scales, even with that number. So I think if Jon took it, he'd be considered a deserter, but maybe he'd get away with it because he would have gone down to Winterfell, and he would have or felt the need to take Winterfell first and have that and be in the middle of battle or something. I'm trying to think timeline wise, here's the thing. Let's get a map of the North up. This is an interesting question. These what if scenarios, right? So Dreadfort is here in the east, and at the beginning of the story, everybody hears about Stannis being at the wall, and they decide, the Boltons decide to pull this fake out move where they leave the Dreadfort not too well manned, hoping that Stannis will try to attack the Dreadfort, and then they'll totally take him by moving. They move their men down to take Deepwood Motte and stuff like that. But they don't have, but at that point they don't really have enough men to take Winterfell. There's no strategic advantage to Winterfell, but there would be this, like, if they said Jon Snow goodbye, Janos Slynt becomes Lord Commander. Maybe Janos Slynt would have turned too, because he's just like, well, fine, if Stannis is giving me all this stuff. And they he then moves the wildlings through at that point, but he needs to get Tormund back and stuff like that. I think Stannis could probably get his soldiers down to Winterfell and try to like hold Winterfell, but then I don't know, what do the Boltons do at that point? Do they try to take Winterfell, or just leave Stannis to starve? Because if Stannis leaves the wall, then the wall would be like, fine, we're Lannisters, and they can just surround Winterfell and starve them out, never deal with them or something like that. Yeah, it's hard to know. These what ifs, they get into a million different ideas. I watched What If over the holidays. The Marvel one was not bad. The first Game of Thrones I ever watched was The Door. Imagine my surprise when I watched the whole series and realized time travel was literally never used again. That's such a weird episode to be your first one. Like, why on earth would be that be your first episode? Try to think what else happens in The Door besides the Bran plot. Let's see here. I'm trying to think, like, if there's something else in that episode that would pull you in. Okay, Arya is in Bravos with the play. That's a setup. The Dothraki see. Jorah reveals grayscale. Okay, Marine. Tyrion summons the Red Priestess Kinvara. She barely plays a role again. Iron Isles argue over the Salt Throne. Oh, and Euron's chosen as king. At the Wall. Okay. So, I get it. I suppose if you watch that episode, you'd be like, holy fuck, what the hell happened? I need to watch the next one. And I could see, because all the other stories are set up, and then you get this crazy time travel plot where you're like, what the hell is this? And then after that, you're, looking for more. And I could see one watching the door and being like, I really need to see the rest of this series. But yeah, it would be really confusing. Like, why was this there? Though people tell me that like Attack on Titan has a time travel uh, plot thrown in kind of out of nowhere that's rather significant, that um, is not necessarily ever used. I mean, it's a big part of the story, but it's kind of thrown in late. Like, oh, time travel's part of this story. That's kind of odd, It's like time travel being thrown in Clone Wars or whatever. But that's kind of funny. But I mean, I do think George was thinking about time travel from the beginning. So, Tinfoil robs Will theory. He named House Bracken his heir and told Kat she would marry. Very loyal to Rob. Married to House Stark a couple generations back. Riverland House worshipping the old gods. Trying to think, because the idea is that House Bracken, the dude's a widower, right? Because he's got his sex worker guy with him, right? So he's Janice Bracken. No, he is married to, who is this Lady Bracken? Third and current wife of Janice Bracken. Oh, so he's having sex with the sex worker despite the fact that his wife is praying all the time. So I don't know. So I mean, Janice Bracken ain't single. That's a toughie. I'm trying to think who else he could in the house he could. Does he just? Yeah, and then Bracken just has daughters that we know of. So it's tough. Who is this Hendry Bracken? Oh, he's killed. So that's a hard one. Well, the problem with this with the theory is no one that we are not introduced to any character who is single or male to have to marry. Now, I guess there's Harry. Is Harry River? No, Harry Rivers dies too. Yeah, Rob could legitimize Harry Rivers, but no, he dies. Yeah, during Stonehenge. Okay. There's no one to marry. I'm sorry. I mean, open to these outside of the box ideas, but I don't see one. There's just no one to marry in House Bracken. Rewatch Time Traveling Bran and the Faceless. Do you think Jaqen is seeking Bloodraven? If so, how does that impact Bran's story after escaping the cave? So this okay, so in truth, I don't think George knows what he's doing with the Faceless Men. Like, I don't. We know that from the Cushing library notes that he's been changing his mind quite a bit about what Jaqen was even looking for in Old Town. Is he looking for the book, Blood and Fire? Is he looking for a glass candle? Is he looking, what is he doing? And we don't know. Originally, glass candles glass candles are already paralleled with werewoods, but the idea is that the glass candles were even more paralleled with werewoods in the sense that they granted eternal life, and you'd never die as long as you had this glass candle with you, just like you never die inside the werewood. But George scrapped that. So like Jaqen was looking for a glass candle, but there's a lot of reasons he could be looking for a glass candle. But he could think that glass candles were an abomination to his religion because all men must die, and if you have a glass candle, you don't die. Or he could be looking for a glass candle because he wants to find somebody. So I don't think George really knew. Now, what I pieced together from what evidence is there, I was like, well, why was Jaqen in the black cells? And why would he let himself get sent to the wall? There must be somebody at the wall or north of the wall that's his target. But then he's looking for a glass candle. So the glass candles now currently the only thing they do is get inside people's dreams or search for people. So he's either searching for someone or wants to get inside somebody's dreams. Somebody that's hard to find, maybe. I don't know. Maybe he wants to, get inside. Maybe he wants to manipulate somebody with their dreams. Who knows? It's the possibilities with glass candles are endless. But now it's not even glass candles because he's looking for a key. The glass candle is in Marwyn's chamber. You don't need a key for Marwyn's chamber. You need a key for something else. So is he looking for that tome? Does George know? It's kind of a mess. But I thought that based on the evidence that was there, that the thing that made the most sense was that he was looking for Bloodraven north of the wall because Bloodraven's hard to find, and that if he were hired by Blackfires, and that those the coins that so there's 2 points in the late books that people feel coins and can't figure out the face on the coin, and that is Pate looks at a dragon and doesn't know what king is on it, and Arya is feeling it on coins and can't figure out the king on the face of it. And the only other time in our series that happens is Dunk, who looks at a coin and can't figure it out for a while, and then realizes that it's Daemon Blackfire. And so then it gets to like, okay, so was Pate getting paid and bit into a Blackfire coin, and was Arya feeling a Blackfire coin, and that's why they couldn't recognize their faces? That means the Blackfires were hiring the Faceless Men, so that would feed into this idea that it could be Bloodraven that he's searching for. Now, I think all of it makes sense, and I think that's where I'm bringing the fanfic and things like that. But I don't know if George really had that idea, because it's probably the one plot line he's the most messy on and doesn't know what he wants and has changed it the most. And we have evidence of him changing it the most. I mean, that and the Victorian plot has changed a lot. That one's also like, who knows what George is thinking with that. He's figuring it out as he goes along. Or maybe Illyrio as well. Illyrio's plans, which don't seem to change, and he's kind of, I think he kind of makes a joke about himself in A Dance with Dragons, where they say, oh, the fat man's plan changes with the wind. You're like, oh, right. Who's the fat man? Well, it's George. I mean, it's Illyrio, but it's George. But if you think Jaqen is seeking Bloodraven, how does it impact Bran's stories after escaping the cave? I think that at least what we're going to do in the fanfic, it's going to be part of Bran's story escaping the cave. I don't know how much it has to do with it after, but I think it has to do with it during. And I've planted some seeds in the Bravo chapter that you can kind of figure it out if you reread the Bravo fanfic chapter on what we're kind of planning there. But yeah, that's what it's about. I don't know if I've thought about anything after, but it's going to impact the story during. Alrighty. No question at the moment, just some random money. Well, thank you, Count Valerian. Thoughts on Franz Kafka? I've only with Kafka I've only read uh um transfer. Why am I blanking? Um the Metamorphosis. I've only read Metamorphosis, but yeah, Metamorphosis is a very creepy story. Um, I guess I haven't read it for a long time because I'm trying to. I've never really guess gone beyond that and thinking like besides this is it being a creepy story about a man turning into a roach. Like, what does it mean beyond that? Um, I guess I haven't put too much thought into it, but to be honest, like most people, we kind of clump all Eastern European writers together as these guys who think way too much, who are really really depressed. These like absolutely brilliant writers who are just like who are all tortured by their own intelligence and all want to kill themselves. But um, some people critics have viewed the transformation into the cockroach as an allegory of anti-Semitism. Could be. Who knows? Who knows? But I've only read Metamorphosis. Yeah. A while back, I brought up the idea of Bran taking the throne by warging a surrogate. I used Jon as an example, but Sweet Robin actually fits better. I mean, you're kind of right that Sweet Robin would fit better. Just who has the armies and who's already been perhaps influenced and taken um, by external forces. Are his Caesars actually like people trying to take control of his mind in the same sense as in the prologue of a Dance with Dragons when Varamir tries to take control of Squirrel. Is that her name? I'm trying to remember the his friend when he tries to take control of Squirrel. She's Caesars, and so this idea of that perhaps. Even though they're spelled differently and have a different historical linguistic history, seizing a mind and a seizure, might be interesting. Might be a similar idea, but though I do think that your idea about Jon Snow is interesting in the sense that like Bran, there's something more vicious and evil doing it to someone he loves, than some stranger like Sweet Robin. But like Bran, it's darker that like Sweet Robin has to do it to somebody he loves. I mean, we actually get into this idea in the fanfic that Bloodraven is this guy who has done all of this evil to people he loved. And, would Bran, in order to save the world, would Bran do a bunch of evil to people he loved? And so it's more George R. R. Martin to have him do it to someone like Jon Snow than for him to do it to Sweet Robin. Obviously it feels more evil to betray someone you love versus a random person, even though a random person is still pretty evil. Do you think that Corran was planning to plant Jon from the start in the chapter that Corran is adapting? He needs to find Ghost to confirm the Eagle Strike and Jon's dream. I think that Corran I mean, in all honesty, I think that George wrote that kind of carelessly and didn't know what he was doing with Corran. If I kind of think about the chapters that make the least sense in the first 3 books, where you're just like, why are the characters doing this? How does this make any sense? Like, Qhorin Halfhand's actions are just some of the most head scratching. Like, what is he talking about? Old powers are waking. What does he mean by that? What is he talking about? Like, why is he so interested in Jon Snow? But the only thing I can come up with how weird Qhorin Halfhand is and how weird the Qhorin Halfhand story is that from the very beginning, Qhorin wants to have Jon Snow like infiltrate the wildlings for some plan. Like, it's the only thing that kind of like makes sense on how like absolutely random and reckless Qhorin is. Now, granted, it's a little cheap in the sense that it's another forward planned at all kind of thing. Like, if you can't really make sense of all of these actions, like, just make it be a master plan of some person that's been thinking about everything. And that's what it is. And so, you know, Qhorin planned it all is the only thing that makes sense, because the Jon A Clash of Kings chapters are just nonsense. They are just nonsense. Like, there's just, I mean, how else can you explain it? That he's just like, no, I want Jon Snow to come with me. Why? Just because. Well, I mean, I've heard other people try to explain Qhorin's actions by saying like it's all because Qhorin knows that Jon Snow is R plus L equals J and he's going to be king and all of this stuff. But it's like, why would you bring the heir to the throne on this incredibly dangerous journey where he nearly gets killed a million fucking times? Like, that makes no sense either. Like, it's such a chaotic story where just randomly Qhorin's just like, I'm just really fascinated with Jon Snow. Why? I don't know. Okay. And then we're going to climb this like cliff and we're going to try to kill some people. And then I'm going to leave you alone with this girl. And I know you're going to let her go because I know you. Oh, do you? You know, like, and then we're going to try to escape the wildlings, but not really escape, and act really weird and send people off and build fires and not build fires. And then all of a sudden, like, you're going to kill me and you're going to infiltrate the wildlings. And, you know, if it like the only thing that makes it not an idiotic story is it being Qhorin's master plan. But at the same time, I admit Qhorin's master plan is a bit cheap. It's cheap. Like, it's like, it's just like, but it's the only thing that makes sense. It's the only thing that makes sense on like why Qhorin is just doing the most idiotic things. That, or, I mean, there are some people that just argue perhaps Qhorin is an idiot. Perhaps Qhorin is an idiot. What impact is Craster's inbreeding going to have? I really thought that, like, you know, obviously my before the end of the show and everything, my idea was that Craster's inbreeding was some sort of like biological, because George had written about population bottlenecking as a subject in not just one, but like a few, like 3 different stories he wrote about population bottlenecking, which is population bottlenecking, by the way, is when you in a diverse gene pool, people are pretty fertile. And so you can have lots and lots of kids. But when you start having very similar genetic code, the viability of offspring, the viability of, you know, your zygotes and embryos and fetuses plummets. And so the more similar, you then have fewer offspring. And so with endangered species, this is a problem because you want this endangered species to have lots of offspring to repopulate itself, but their genetic code is so similar that they can only have like 2 kids. And you're like, God, 3 kids, then one dies later, and you're like, so the population just bottlenecks and it remains endangered because of the genetic similarity. So and so George wrote about this a bunch. And so I was convinced that the others was an example of like, population bottlenecking, and that they were giving these inbred babies and trying to kill them off that way. And realistically, Craster should also have like many more kids based on like how many wives he has and things like that, showing that population bottlenecking perhaps is already happening. But again, how much does George think about this? Am I overanalyzing it? So that was my idea, that one, but also the inbreeding can produce the special genes. Like maybe the others need special gene people to actually make the transition to others. They can't just be any random Joe. I need somebody with the special genes, and stuff like that. So, that was my idea, that the others were looking for specific genes, and that Craster was feeding the others for that reason. And that it was actually a plan, or at least the Night's Watch thought it was a plan to stabilize, placate, keep them at least even, of course there's this other idea that like, that the others had a very low population and Craster has been feeding them babies. And the reason now that they can attack is because they have all these Craster babies, so, but I'm going to try to explain something that makes sense in the fanfic. I don't know if George like ever came up with a good reason, George might just be like, oh, I'm going to create something creepy. Incest is creepy. Why not? I need some place for the Night's Watch to hang out. But certainly, like once Craster is killed, now the others have every reason to attack because they have no source for babies. It worries me that the show did not do anything with it. Like it just was not mentioned ever fucking again. But like the secret and explanation of Craster's Keep, like it seems like it's something that really, really, really needs to be explained, like why it was there and how it got integrated into the regular practices of the Night's Watch, and like the nature of the others. It seems like it needs to be explained. I think either a scheme to bring down the others, or a scheme to bring forth the others, or a scheme to placate the others. Like it needs to be some sort of scheme rather than just some random fucking dude doing some random shit because he just liked banging his daughters. Like it's got to be more than that, because all the show has is that it was just a random dude banging his daughters that had no effect on anything. But well. Do you think Daemon Blackfire was actually a good guy? Did Daenerys love him, and he just justified the usurp, or is he just a puppet? Thank you. We've been given so little on this. I would George throw like it's odd because when I think about history and people give these like so I'm torn on a lot of this stuff. This gets me torn on Fire and Blood as well. So when we look at real history, when historians really look at history, they usually try to find the most boring explanation. Like when somebody tells some crazy story about like, about Nero having sex with his mother Agrippina, historians are just like, no, he wasn't. Like the real world isn't that interesting. Like this is obviously some story that somebody made up to try to make Nero look bad, that kind of stuff. Or why did he murder this person? Well, he murdered him because he got jealous about something. No, he was probably a political scheme, that kind of stuff. Like there's usually a very boring reason for everything. And so when George writes his history and has history in it, I tend to think about it in the same way that when you talk about, the actual reason that Daemon and you know, had this problem. It was really like a love affair, or I'm sorry, well, I mean, it was really like Bittersteel and Bloodraven like warring over Shira Seastar, and Daemon loving Daenerys and being denied and things like this. That it was really a love story. That these little personal things made all the difference. Because if it were real history and you read that, you'd be like, no, it didn't. No, that wasn't the reason. There was like political calculus or something. But in the contemporary story in Ice and Fire, those kind of things are happening. Like Cersei and Jaime is an actual like love affair that affects the plot significantly. Like their personal feelings really make a difference, or like Daenerys and her feelings about Dario versus his Dar, that really affects the story. Or Aerys Oakheart, falling in love with Arianne, or Robert being in love with Lyanna, or Robb Stark and his fuck up with Jane Westerling. Like, people's personal feelings do affect the story. And so with these situations with like where it's history in the story, I don't know. I'm a little torn, because if it's like normally you read history and you're like, let's choose the most boring option. But also George R. R. Martin is like actually writes stories where people really do have these like feelings that affect things. So I don't know if I can jump to any conclusions about whether he was a good guy, or whether the Daenerys, Dornish Daenerys loved him and things like that. We just don't have enough information, and I haven't really thought about it that much. But I guess it could go either way. No one's ever really spoken that ill of Daemon. Like, they speak ill of Bittersteel, but no one's really spoken ill of Daemon, and he really did, it seemed, inspire people. And so I want to say that Daemon was not a bad guy, that or else he wouldn't have inspired so many people in the situation. I mean, because there's also something with like with Rhaenyra and Aegon, where Rhaenyra gets half the kingdom and Aegon gets half the kingdom. But Rhaenyra, all the lords, she really was chosen as heir, and all the lords did vow to like follow her. It's not unexpected that she would have gotten half the kingdom, and that Aegon, being the male, would have gotten half. That's like a realistic kind of situation where you're actually saying, okay, which one would we go with? What's weird about Daemon is he's a bastard, and allowing a bastard, a legitimized bastard, to be king is not good for any lord. Like, no lord wants legitimized bastards going around like usurping their trueborn heirs. And so it's surprising that Daemon gets half the kingdom to support his side. It's really surprising, because the other shit that Daemon has is like, well, he's got the sword. Well, who gives? Like, the average lord is not sitting there going, who fucking cares? He didn't swear any oath. He's screwing up the entire feudal order. So I want to actually say that Daemon must have been very inspiring in order to get the amount of power and following he did, because he has the much weaker argument for being ruler over Daeron. I mean, I sure want to see you not be hungry on stream, but no, this is 100% you insulting the way we Europeans eat. I look, this is me admitting to my own like bias when you're raised a certain way. And this is like so stupid, right? Like, I admit it's so stupid. But this is how like culture gets you, right? They get you when you're young, and they instill something in you, and you can't fucking like change, right? I for the word often, I don't pronounce the T. Probably half of Americans pronounce the T, half of Americans don't. Half of Americans probably say often, half of Americans say often. I don't know why, but like it grates my ear to hear often. Like no reason. There should be no reason, right? Like who cares? Who cares? In fact, historically speaking, since it derives from oft times, often historically is more in line, right? But I say often, but because I've always said it, and like my family always said often, and that's how I learned it. It's like grating. It's really hard to change. There's still these old people like lingering with their two spaces after the period bullshit. I used to be one of those people, and then I changed. I was like, no, one space after the period. So it's the same thing with these eating practices. I understand it's completely relative, completely, utterly relative. However, I'm an American and I was raised a certain way, and there's this like deep visceral like thing where you're just like, ooh, that seems wrong. But for no fucking reason. I understand it's completely dumb. It's completely dumb. So it's these things, it's just these things. Is Pycelle the most significant Grand Maester? Well, I mean, it's hard to be more significant than Orwell. Orwell, I mean, at least my beliefs about Orwell. I mean, I think Orwell was a big part of causing the Dance of the Dragons, and he. So it's really tough to beat Orwell in his significance. Now, Pycelle, I'm trying to think like. The big thing about Pycelle is like letting Jon Arryn die, right? Like what if Jon Arryn had lived, and how that would have affected the war? Would Jon Arryn have called out the incest and things like that, and would he have told Robert and what that would have done from the beginning? I mean, the thing is, if Jon Arryn lives, the Vale joins the war right at the beginning, and it's pretty quick. It's a pretty quick, I think, war at that point, where the Lannisters just aren't enough to possibly like take everybody, and so it's Pycelle is pretty significant. He is, but he didn't, those, one could argue that the war was going to happen anyway. Maybe the victor would have been different. Maybe things would have played out differently, but hard to beat out Orwell, and we'll get to it when I get to, I mean, I'm starting to get to this point in overanalyzing. Some very, like, I would say like where we are in overanalyzing is some of the best points in Fire and Blood, because keep in mind this is the first stuff that George wrote, because he wrote Princess and the Queen first, and so the most exciting, interesting, significant stuff happens at the beginning of Princess and the Queen, and then he kind of meanders off into random battles, and then he goes back and he writes Rogue Prince, which I think the concept of Rogue Prince is fantastic, because that's where he introduces the idea of dueling historians with Mushroom and Septon Eustace. But Rogue Prince just peters off into horrible, unfinished garbage near the end with so many mistakes. And if you've been following me on overanalyzing, you kind of know what I'm talking about. And then I don't know if I'm a fan of the rest of Fire and Blood is whatever. I don't know if it's that great, I think, but I do think that like the beginning of Princess and the Queen and the scheming of the Maesters is really interesting to analyze, and I think the concept of Rogue Prince with dueling historians is a very cool thing to bring in. So anyway, if you ever want to get into overanalyzing and haven't been watching, it's now's the time. Now's the time. Um, oh, did someone ask? Oh well. Let's see. What chapters next? Beyond. Chapters for fanfic. It's gonna be we're Quentin's finishing up. Should have Quentin, you know, within a month or so, and after that, Tyrion 3, and then I might try. I might go with Jamie. Might go with Jamie after that. I think it's looking like Jamie, just because I feel like we need like a good significant, you know, plot moving chapter after the after the the Battle of Fire. Um, um, Shelve John in the fanfic. Can't he rape and kill innocents? Um, Jon Snow. I mean, you'll have to wait to see if we. I mean, I haven't decided fully if Jon Snow is going to have a POV in Wins. It's looking like no. Um, and I think Melis. I think we've got enough characters in the North to cover everything we want to see. I mean, we've got fucking Bran, Melisandre, Theon, Asha, Davos. Like we've got 5 point of views. You know, I think we can manage. I think we can manage the northern story with 5 points of view. Um, and so I don't think we need John. I think that's just, you know, let's let's just leave it. Let's just leave it. Oh, but I've got a fever. I want more John Con chapters. Yeah, we'll get to John Con eventually. I mean, we got a lot. You know, want to get to some other people before John Con, but you know, we're gonna pick up either during Aegon's coronation or right after Aegon's coronation, and you know his situation. We may have to do a Cersei before we get to John Con again, because you know obviously those two things. Who is the harrower? The harrower is Aaron. Um, I was thinking about like possible names um, for Aaron chapters, and the the harrower is this idea of. I mean, we needed something that's religious enough. So like when we look at like the Aaron chapter names. Okay, we've got the the drowned man, the prophet, um, and uh, the forsaken. And so each of those has you know an element of Jesus and Jesus going out into the desert and facing his trials against Satan and then going on to the cross and being forsaken, right? And so all these similarities are made, and you know there's a parallel to Jonah and the whale, but that parallel to Jonah and the whale is already made in the Bible for Jesus, right? And the same with Jonah the prophet, Jesus the prophet, you know, um, the drowned man. You have a baptism, you know, and but you also Jonah is drowned in the sea, like so you've got you know Jesus is baptized, Jonah is baptized underwater, like he is a drowned man. Then you have the forsaken. Jonah is forsaken, he's swallowed by the whale. Jesus is forsaken on the cross and things like that. And so where do you go from there? um well, how do you what's after going on the cross? Well, you go into hell, you know. And so the harrower, the there's a period where Jesus is in hell, and they call this the harrowing of hell, and that's the period of time in which Jesus is in hell. So, um, and so this is the idea is that Aaron in his next chapter will be in hell. And so he is going to be the harrower, because Jesus is the harrower, the harrowing of hell. And so after this, you then can have a rebirth, but he's got to be in hell first. So that's the harrower. Have you ever talked about Justin Massey taking Shireen to Bravos with him? Arya stealing Shireen's face would be a cool plot. They I've thought a lot about. We've talked about it a little bit in the past, but it's really fun to think about because, frankly, Justin Massey is one of the most likable characters that we've come across in the story, and he's kind of a dick, but he's funny dick, and I feel that's almost a reason why kind of Asha likes him a little bit. And so this idea, now he's given this impossible quest that find me 10,000 sellswords or whatever. Or give me the Golden Company. Well, you're not getting the Golden Company. Collect 10,000 sellswords. Oh my God, like how many sellsword companies do you need to buy at that point? Are there even that many sellswords in the world anymore for Justin Massey to buy? That seems impossible. Also, timeline-wise, it seems fucking impossible. Like Justin Massey's got to spend 3 weeks getting back to the wall. Then he's got to cross the wall. That'll take a week. Get on a ship, go to Bravo, start collecting sellswords. That takes months to collect all that stuff. So this idea that, did Stannis even want Justin Massey to succeed, or is he just like, you know what, Justin Massey, you suck and I want to get rid of you. I don't want to kill you because you don't deserve to die, but you suck. Okay. let's just get you out of here. Which seems like the more realistic thing. That he's just like, whatever, But at the same time, when people mention the idea that like, Carmine sends me a random message. But there's this idea that like, yeah, when people brought up the fact that like Justin Massey with a fake Arya or Shireen and a fake Arya, like in Bravos for Arya to meet Arya, is a fucking crazy goddamn like interesting idea. And I'm like, once I heard it, I was like, that's pretty cool. Okay, maybe we should have Justin Massey make it to Bravos and have Arya run into Arya. Like that would be something. So I don't know. Yeah, so normally I think something that George didn't even think about and wasn't planning on having in the story, but it's a cool enough idea that it's almost irresistible. I think that we have to do it. I asked in your recent vid, the source that Tyland was tortured by the Blacks for a bit and was at the Greek Council. Did the torture mess him up? I think so. But I also think that he was lying near the end. So for those that don't know, I'm going to spoil Fire and Blood, but Tyland Lannister gets the Theon treatment. He gets the Theon treatment in Fire and Blood. He's tortured, messed up, gelded, the full Theon treatment. And so I think we're supposed to think that he's messed up to the same degree as Theon, and that he's a whipped, broken man. And I think that's what we're supposed to think. And so when people are like, when at the end, when they're asking questions like, oh, who was a black and who was a green? He's just like, oh, I don't remember. It's not like, oh, I don't remember in this like nice grandfatherly way, like, haha, I don't even remember who was a black and who was a green. It might be a fuck, I don't even want to clue anyone in on sides because I do not want to be tortured again. I do not want anything to happen to me like what happened to me. So I think that's how we're supposed to view late story Thailand. That he is Theon, he is Reek, um, and to not really take anything he said seriously, because he is a broken human being at this point. I think it's the only way we're supposed to see him. Which, you know, God, isn't he Hand though? It's so fucking crazy. It's so fucking crazy. I mean, it's gonna be a long time till we get that far into Fire and Blood, but it's for over analyzing. But he's probably one of the most more interesting things. Did you start Berserk yet? I have. I understand why Carmine specifically likes it. It's pretty solid. You know, besides like reading just the beginning, I have not. I have not. I should probably start it soon. I've actually I don't have anything right now to watch, so maybe Carmine will probably remind me that like something is coming up soon. I've agreed to watch. Three Body Problem, so we'll see how that is. And I finished Reservation Dogs, which was pretty good. I'd love to talk about Reservation Dogs sometime, but I know like no one else has seen it, but because it's like not you know, if something's on Hulu or whatever, it's not as popular as everything else. Um, but rank all the seasons of Game of Thrones from favorite to least favorite. You know, this is a pretty easy thing for me because I honestly think season 1 is by far the best, and I think season 2 is the second best, and I think season 3 is the third best, and I think season 4 is a big drop off, but is still the fourth best. And then at this point, maybe I would rank season 6 ahead of season 5, but it's pretty close. It doesn't really matter, but I'm trying to let me bring up season. I'm trying, like, if there's something really good during season 5 that might have changed my mind. Because season 5 has Hardhome, which, you know, I remember my first watch and being like, fuck, Hardhome was, you know, that was a really great episode. But you know what? I know Carmine will kill me for this because I know he hates season 5 the most, but like I would probably say I like season 5 more than season 6. And the reason I don't like season 6 is because it is a replay of season 5. Like everything that happens in season 6 is just season 5 again. And like, think about it. Like, you know, there's a battle for Winterfell. There's a battle for Marine, you know. I want to say like the High Sparrow stuff just like goes on and on again. Arya is just getting trained again. Like there's just this repetition. So I would say that like I kind of feel like D&D were like treading water thinking Winds of Winter was going to come out and never came out. And so I would say in order, I would actually rank the seasons in order, honestly. Though 5 and 6 are pretty close. That 1 is the best, 2 is the second best, 3 is the third best, 4 is the fourth best, 5 is the fifth best, 6 is the sixth best, 7th is second is near on the bottom, and 8 is the worst. Like I would really go in order. I think they really do go in order. Oh, Duolingo streak check. Fuck. Did I even do my Duolingo today? Probably gonna miss it today. I'm probably gonna miss it today. It's been a bad week, but what am I at? 642? 642. But this week is a horrible week. Look at this. 3 missed days. 3 missed days. 642. I suppose like it's funny because like I must have had like 100 missed days over the course of like the 2 years in this. But um I don't know. Uh, the I don't know if Duo. I mean, maybe Duolingo. I dropped my kid off at a Chinese school today, and he had a little Chinese interview in Chinese to keep his Chinese up from being in Taiwan. And I actually recognized one of the words, and I was like, "Oh, right, I Duolingo helped me with at least that word. I seem to remember it was Mian Shi interview because he had an interview, and so they were talking about the Mian Shi. I was like, oh, I learned that from Duolingo. Man, oh man." Um. Oh fuck. This is a really good question, and I feel almost disappointed that I don't have a very good answer about this because I people have brought this one up to me before. Um, for 10 plus years, I've been wondering why Ares only spared Ethan Glover from Brandon's Rhaegar must die party, only for him to die at the Tower of Joy. Any thoughts? I've thought about this a bit, and it's like I don't know. Like it doesn't really seem like there'd be any good reason for Ares to let that guy survive, right? Like like are the Glovers like secret Targaryen supporters? Like because we've never heard anything like that before, people have brought this up a lot. Like, oh my god, what? Why? What? Um. Oh my gosh. Ethan was the only one Brandon Stark's companions to have survived after being arrested. Um. What is Cat? Does Cat have any good quotes on that? On Ethan? I'm trying to remember. Like, Jimmy poured one last cup. He rode into the Red Keep with a few companions, shouting for Prince Rhaegar to come and die. But Rhaegar wasn't there. Aerys sent his guards to arrest them all for plotting his son's murders. The others were Lord's sons too, it seemed to me. Ethan Glover was Brandon's squire. He's the only one to have survived. The others were Jeffrey Mallister, Kyle Royce, and Elbert Aaron, John Aaron's nephew and heir. It's queer how she still remembered their names after so many years. Aerys accused them of treason and summoned their fathers to court to answer to the charge with their sons and hostages. When they came, he had them murdered without trial, fathers and sons both. The only explanation I can is that Ethan was young, and that like Aerys was like, well, it's not your fault because this is just what your sir was doing or whatever. Well, not even your sir. I mean, there's another way like squires, like, does I mean, I guess the Northerners use squires even though they're not knights, but I mean, I guess the only explanation I have is that Ethan Glover was young and that Aerys like showed pity on him, which when you're trying to paint this like story of cruelty from the Mad King, like why have him, like why put that in, and why not just have Ned take someone else to the Tower of Joy? So yeah, that's it. The king was being nice, and he's like, yeah, the squire isn't guilty for the crimes of his teacher or whatever. But it's the only good one I have. I mean, because I don't know. I mean, other than that, you got to be like, oh, some sort of weird conspiracy on everything. But it's there's just not enough written for anyone to come up with anything like very substantial on that. I'm just thinking, yeah, he was young, but then Ned brings him because it's going to be what, like a year later, year. I'm trying to think of how long the war actually lasted, because they say the war lasted near a year to the storming of the city. So you've got another couple months. So I'm trying to think like how old Ethan would be after that. Like Ethan's only like a year and a half older after that situation. So maybe he was like 15 or something, and then he's like 16 and a half when he dies of the Tower of Joy, or maybe 16 and he dies at 17 and a half at the Tower of Joy. Um, I guess, if you want to go into the analysis of it, like Ned's more of a dick that he's willing to like sacrifice the life of a child more than Ares, which I suppose fits with Ned's personality. The whole like winter is coming and Catelyn being like, Rickon's 3, like that's really a line. Winter is coming. He's 3. Try to think here. Let's see. I think so. Oh well. Any theories on what happens to the banker at the wall with Stannis, and then leaves, but he's still in the north in a war zone? You're talking about Tycho So, I mean, I guess the idea would be that Tycho, which is a crazy, crazy kind of character, being you don't go into banking if you're a risk taker, and this guy like goes into the middle of a war zone in the middle of winter for 3 weeks, travels like by horse, trading hostages and meeting different people, and just so he can like sign some papers and stuff. I mean, no one has any particular reason to kill Tycho. There's no reason to. So, you try to think like who's coming on top, like when Tycho makes it back to the wall. A lot of different people could win the battle there. Maybe the Night's Watch ends up winning. Maybe the Queen's Men end up winning. Which I actually think the Queen's Men probably are in the best position of winning. And maybe the Wildlings. The Wildlings have the numbers, If the Wildling chieftains or whatever get out of the shield hall, maybe the Wildlings have enough, But it seems like the Queen's Men are probably in the best situation to win the battle. Or maybe the Night's Watch ambushes them all. But all of these things together, like no matter who wins, let's say Tycho Nestoris comes riding up. Does anyone care about this Braavosi banker? And does anyone feel like they should execute an Iron Bank representative? Because certainly, if the Watch wins, they're pro Lannister at this point. So they would not want to piss off the Iron Bank by executing their representative. Then again, they don't like the fact that he's trying to walk with this like agreement. But if they believe Stannis is dead, then he's just like, well, the agreement's null. So go on. Who cares? The agreement doesn't mean anything. And then there's the, if the Queen's Men win, they of course want him to go on with the agreement. If the Wildlings win, they would just be confused on who this guy was, but I don't think they would have any reason to kill the guy, So Tycho Nestoris seems to be kind of safe, only in the sense that why would anyone want to kill him? I mean, maybe he'd get hit in the crossfire or something. But that's about it. That's the only way I see him dying is him getting killed in the crossfire. Um, but other than that, like, why would anyone kill poor Tycho? He's just a Pravosi banker. Is there any significance to the Night's Watch parallels with Stannis beyond child sacrifice? Oh, the Night's King. Night's King parallel besides child sacrifice. Will he be more relevant than dying fighting Boltons? Um, there's a few small ones. I'm not going to say it's large, but uh, I mean, I suppose one could argue that Melisandre, as his like as a parallel to the Corpse Queen, that in the Night's King situation, he had this like cold, uh, you know, cold bride, even though she could just be a wildling. Maybe she's a white, maybe she's an other. I mean, the other doesn't make sense. Like, why would you be having sex with something that can freeze your penis off? I mean, I know that happens in the boys, but it's ridiculous. But say it's a white and he's having sex with a dead body, which is very George R. R. Martin because he's written some stories on that. But probably a wildling realistically. So the idea is that, okay, this cold ice one, and then Stannis is with this like hot fire person. The idea that Melisandre can raise fire wights, animate fire wights, maybe, if she can do what Thoros can, if the Corpse Queen could animate dead bodies, create ice wights, there's that kind of parallel. But yeah, child sacrifice. I'm trying to think of like if there's anything relevant. I mean, bringing the Night Fort back as a base. That's about significance of that. And then I guess the stories is this idea that in the Night King story, Joramun and Lord and King of Winterfell team up to take out the Night King. So this idea that wildlings and Starks could, but there's no Starks left. Like, but the Northerners and the wildlings would get together like to overthrow this guy, but I don't know. That doesn't seem like it's a parallel that would happen. It just doesn't seem to make sense. But that's about it. I'm not saying the parallels aren't huge, but it seems like to get people of this idea, oh, he's bringing back the Night Fort. He's got his queen. He's resurrecting dead people. We gotta stop him or something. I don't know, but the legends or something. But what's your theory on the boats that Jon sends to pick up the wildlings? Are they coming back at all, filled with free folk or the dead? I think it makes more sense to have them filled with the dead, honestly. But the ships. Let's bring this up again because there is some time spent talking about it. Oh right, he gets the three ships, the Tychonosaurus ships, right? He grabs the 3 ships, and oh no, and then he has 11. He takes Stannis's ships. Oh man, he mentions them a lot. This is so stupid. All right, so 11 ships. 11 ships. He mentions 11 ships so much. Because he uses Salador Sands Remnant, an Ibbenese whaler that Cotter Pike commandeers. First of all, those Ibbenese, fuck, they need to come back. Those Ibbenese need to come back into the story. It's just these Ibbenese whalers are going to be like, "What are you doing, my ship? Like, where I'm just stuck at Eastwatch." So yeah, let's see. This is the bring this. This is what I'm talking about. 3 Bravosi ships would bring the fleet at Eastwatch up to 11, including the Ibbenese whaler that Cotter Pike had commandeered on John's orders, a trading galley out of Pentos similarly impressed, 3 battered Lycene warships, remnants of Salador Sun's fleet. All 3 of Sun's ships had been in dire need. 11 ships would be no, and then I think it's 3 ships with the yeah, it's 3 Bravosi ships. So he's commandeering. I guess maybe they have their own ships too, because I don't know how this all adds up to 11. But nonetheless, he mentions 11 ships. 11 ships was no wise enough. And then it comes back. 11 ships to Hardhome. Calm seas today. 11 ships sailed to Hardhome. And then they say, oh, we've got 6 ships left of the 11. You know, like, what's the ships are mentioned way too much. You're absolutely right. So I'm trying to think, like, what would be the point of like because Mother Mole doesn't have that many doesn't have that many. I mean, I guess we don't really know how many people Mother Mole has. She could have like thousands, but it's not going to be anywhere close to like what the Weeper has. And so, what would you do? And if these thousands of wildlings, let's say 1,000 wildlings, get on these 6 ships, and they make it to Eastwatch, like, what's the point of that? I mean, I suppose they can lead those mammoths that are coming around. But at some point, you got to start simplifying the plot. Like, you know, either make them into others, or have them quickly make it to Castle Black so they can join the forces there or something. But I don't. You're right that they don't seem to be that significant. Like, I just can't think of the significance. I suppose 1,000 others, 1,000 not others, but 1,000 whites at Eastwatch causing trouble would be a pain, would be something. The only person that could possibly be a point of view of all of this, of these events, is Davos. I mean, there's some cool stuff that could happen at Eastwatch. An Eastwatch story could be cool because there's so many missing elements that are actually at Eastwatch. You've got the mammoths. You've got the ships coming back from Hardhome. You've got John's friends, Pip and Gren. You've got missing characters that maybe George is never going to bring back, like the Lannister loyalists who were sent. You've got the religious zealots from A Clash of Kings, Alar Deem, like all sorts of people could conceivably show up at Eastwatch, but you'd need Davos there to be the point of view to see it all. Maybe come up with a good Davos story about Eastwatch, and why he's there. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I mean, do whites? I don't even know if whites could sail ships, like if they, if they took the ships and got on, because I think Melisandre says that all the ships are lost, and not a man shall return. Um, which may, not a man, but maybe others, or not whites or whatever. But um, interesting idea, and what it could mean if the others start crossing at Eastwatch while the Weeper starts coming the other way. I guess it's more fun if they're whites, if somehow whites get on those ships. I mean, the whites were fairly. I'm trying to think how clumsy the one that attacked Mormont was. Like, he was able to open doors. Do you think they can operate a ship? I don't know. Can they operate? Oh, so behind, so behind. If the Maesters were plotting Southern Ambition's scheme, do you think Gerald Hightower was involved, influencing Aerys? Might also tie into Tower of Joy. What we kind of know about Gerald Hightower is that if he were, like, he's not one of Rhaegar's main friends. So his friends are Went and Dane. And so Gerald Hightower being at the Tower of Joy is weird. I mean, granted, he's just ordered to do it, and so maybe he does it because he's ordered. But it's an interesting idea of, like, what is Gerald doing there compared to, like, Dane and Went. So, maybe he's there to sabotage everything, to make sure that Rhaegar's plans fail, to get rid of the Targaryens. I think it's a, kind of an interesting idea. That maybe it's a Hightower thing. Like, the thing is like, George knew from the beginning that the Hightowers were going to be players later on. And this is, like, first of all, you can just read the appendix of the Game of Thrones, and the Hightowers are important. But then later on, when he starts writing, like, the outlines for Feast for Crows and, like, what Feast for Crows is going to have, he mentions that, like, introducing House Hightower being such an important thing for his story going forward. And they still have not really entered the game. He put them in the Dance of the Dragons, but what is the whole game? So I think it's an interesting idea that Gerald Hightower was there to fuck everything up, and that Rhaegar misjudged him and didn't know about the Hightower conspiracy. Some people would argue. There are other people that argue the other way, that the kind of Jon Snow prophecy, R plus A equals J, like, Rand, Neo, Harry Potter kind of idea, that, like, Gerald Hightower was won over and realized that, like, no, we need to protect this boy to, like, save the galaxy, kind of idea. That's what a lot of people had, back in the day, kind of had those ideas. But I think it's more interesting that Gerald Hightower is some loose cannon that has his own ideas that we're gonna bring later. I mean, you got to think, like, from the beginning, George knows that House Hightower is going to have their own agenda, and the only Hightower character he has is Gerald Hightower. What does that mean? For a long time, he's the only character until, like, the wedding, right? And a few more Hightowers show up, but the Purple Wedding. Do you think Sam could lead an army using glass candles? I would like it if he beat Randall in battle using magic. Thoughts on General Sam? I think Sam could conceivably do that. I think one of the very interesting, influential ideas is from Tyrion talks about his father being this general looking over a Syvas board in the second Tyrion sample chapter, and how he just sat there unmoving, like, controlling everything. And I've talked about this before, how the all-powerful shut-in is this reoccurring George R. R. Martin theme that he throws in so many stories about like this random person stuck in a room that is actually controlling everything. You know, whether it be the pear-shaped man or Royd Eris from Night Flyers, and you know this idea of this like, you know, or the great and powerful turtle. This idea that I'm the shut-in, you know, I'm a nerd who likes to stay inside and read. I'm George R. R. Martin, but I can control the world, you know, from my little room. So I think there's definitely elements of that to have in with Sam. But at the same time, is Sam really the type of person to be cruel enough and to lead people like that? The reason that Tywin Lannister could do that is because he was Tywin Lannister and he didn't care. People died and didn't affect him, you know. Sam's not that person. So it's not that like Sam doesn't have that power, but he's not necessarily the best person to be leading soldiers without thinking about like who they are. But all of the elements are there. You're right that all the elements are there with the glass candles and Sam, and Bran. I mean, Bran too. Bran and Sam are, you know, paralleled. It's this idea. Could the story be a criticism of Nietzsche's master-slave moralism? So what we know about George R. R. Martin is that he at least dabbled many years ago, at least in the 70s, with existentialism. We know he's at least read Sartre. Sartre is mentioned in the Armageddon Rag, and so many of the themes that seem like in the story seem to relate to Sartre, because Sartre is very focused on choice, and like that appears in like, you know, the show, even how important choice is. And so like obviously like Nietzsche is kind of the lead up to Sartre. Like Sartre is in many ways a criticism of Nietzsche. So, but let's see, the master-slave morality. Nietzsche argues that there are two fundamental types of morality: master morality and slave morality, which correspond respectively to the dichotomies of good bad, good evil. In master morality, good is a self-designation of the aristocratic classes. It's synonymous with nobility and everything powerful and life-affirming. Bad has no commentary implication, merely referring to the common or low qualities, in contradiction to the warrior ethos of the ruling nobility. In slave morality, the meaning of good is made the antithesis of the original aristocracy good, which itself is relabeled evil. The inversion of values develops out of the resentment the weak feel towards the powerful. I mean, I'm trying to think about it like, you know, more specifically, because obviously like I do think that like George R. R. Martin, you know, I don't know how much he kept reading existentialism. Like Dying of the Light was probably his peak moment of like thinking about these sorts of things. But you know, it of course appears in the Jaime story, and the Jaime story about you know, choosing your own path and things like that, and defining yourself. But like this specific criticism, I don't know. You know, I wish if I kind of feel like if George R. R. Martin really wanted to make a real criticism of like how cruel the upper class is with regards to the lower class, he would have more lower class characters. Um, I almost feel like I mean I think that there is some, I've seen criticism of George R. R. Martin's work in that all of the main players are still upper class. Like even Davos, which is the best you have, is still like, you know, a self-made aristocratic person now, even though he came from poverty. That we don't really ever get the common man's um, perspective. That we're supposed to feel bad for all of these people dying, but we never really get that perspective. Um, and so I kind of feel like if he was really, really focused on this juxtaposition of like the ruling class and the people and things like this and their feelings and what morality was, that he would have some actual common characters. Um, so I mean, you know, I think you're gonna probably get elements of everything though. I just don't know how conscious he is of it, but that, you know, it might slip into some other things. But I don't know. I'd have to actually read this idea more in depth and try to um look at it. But to see like how much like what George was thinking about it. Off the top of my head, I can't give the best answer. Um Way, way back in the past. Sorry guys. Huh. Huh. It's like sometimes like, okay, an hour. So is John a king now? No point of view needed. Um, I think that probably George's original idea um, was that John, that R plus L equals J was like in the show, that it was another divisive element that was going to create conflict. That the twist that he had come up with was, most people read the Secret Prince, you know, super special birthright plot and they think, oh, this person's going to save the world. And so um you know, your Harry Potter, your Neo, your Jesus, because they gave Jesus a lineage too, um and that the person with the right lineage uh is the special person, and they're the perfect person to save the world. And I think his whole haha, I tricked you, subverted expectations thing was, he's the perfect person to fuck everything up. That like, had John actually been a bastard the whole time, Daenerys wouldn't have seen a rival, and there wouldn't have been another schism, and everything would have been fine. But instead, everything falls apart. Um, the show tried to have an element of that, but in the end, it was just Varys died. It's the only thing. The only thing, R plus L equals J in the show only led to Varys' death. Nothing else was achieved through it at all. Nothing. Um, I suppose like John and Danny stopped like being so hot and heavy, but it didn't really change anything at all, because John didn't change his loyalty, you know. Um, and he didn't kill Danny because it was no longer, things weren't hot and heavy. Um, and so originally his, you know, I think his idea was that uh, that was the role of R plus O equals J. That John. Now I don't know if like he wanted John to be king of the North, you know, maybe the whole re-kneeling thing, and just like, he's king for a moment, but then he submits and he becomes lord again. Um, is probably like same thing, history happening over again. Um, this idea that Rob creates the new king in the north, and then he submits again. He's the king that kneels. Like, it happens that fast. But I think that was probably like how the show went was his original idea. Now, I don't necessarily think that's George's idea now. Maybe George doesn't have any ideas now. Everything's up in the air. But I think I've come up with some interesting things for John to do or not do. I think perhaps John as Ghost is a more interesting idea. And what John's fate means for Bran is more interesting. But I think this was like his big thing, like I think he really did want to have this like, haha, tricked you. Your Jesus character is actually the one who's making everything fall apart. If only you didn't have Jesus. But there, even if we assume that like George wrote everything and he lived to 200 years old, there's just not enough time in the story for all of that. He's got supposedly 2 books left, and building all that up. Like, if Daenerys gets to Westeros at the end of A Dance with Dragons, then you have one book to establish Dany meeting John kneeling, them falling in love, them having a conflict, and it being like a meaningful like breakup at the end, and achieving everything that they didn't achieve in the show. So I don't know. George probably planned for John to be at least the king of the wildlings or the king of the north, but who knows what he plans now. And I don't know if the fanfic is heading that way. Could you elaborate on your hypothetical ending to A Song of Ice and Fire? Sansa rowing to the Isle of Faces. It's a really beautiful idea, very George-esque. My original idea, and I don't know if I'd fully want to do this, but like my original idea was more because I was reading at the time when I first formulated it. I had been reading George's earlier works, and George is really communist sympathetic in his works from the 70s, like very, very sympathetic to communism and very critical of Western capitalism. He's not into Soviet communism. He's not into Chinese communism. But you got to remember that at the time, like in the 60s and 70s, there was a hippie element in America that was into this intellectual communism movement. And American communists have always been the intellectual types. They're not the cultural revolution. We need to kill all we need to shut down the universities and kill the elitists. It's more like we as the elite and intellectuals have come to realize that communism is the right way kind of idea. And, I feel like George he never explicitly says I'm a communist at any point in his life, but he's very, very sympathetic to these ideas. And keep in mind, this is the height of the Cold War, So to be a guy who's not portraying the Soviet Union as that evil and having sympathies, is something. So my original idea was that Sansa, through all of her experiences, was going to all these armies were coming in on the God's Eye, and that Sansa would, in the last chapter, kind of like feeling that there needed to be some sort of togetherness, a feeling of community, to go beyond all of this, would row out to the God's Eye. And Howland Reed would be, you'd never say his name, but Howland Reed would row her out. And that at the end, she would enter the werewood net, and she would somehow use the werewood net to kind of influence all people to be more hive-minded and communal. And that's what humanity needed. That they needed, you know, more sympathy, more connection, more empathy, um, to really put an end to war. That humanity needed to learn to be hive-minded and communist. Was my original idea. Um, I don't know if like now that I've seen the show's ending, which does kind of feel like it might have been George's ending. Um, and after that, I've read a lot of George's books from the '80s and the '90s, and he doesn't have very much in the '90s other than Wild Cards. But there's a there's a shift in his thinking. He's not as hippie, um, and he's more ambiguous and things like that. So I don't know if that originally was going to be his ending, you know. So I kind of, but I still had this idea, this idea in my mind of Sansa alone in this boat, getting rowed out to the Isle of Faces and having this like at least like heading to the strangest, most you know, mysterious location, um, and somehow like doing something that would save the world or prevent catastrophe. And so, you know, now I kind of think like rather than it being so explicit that she would be causing everyone to become hive minded or something like that, that there might be some other element that she would do. But this was this idea that Sansa would join the werewood net or do something on this island that would cause all of the armies to stop fighting at once. That was the best I could come up with was this idea that she somehow infects the world with her empathy. But I don't know what she would be doing. Now it's kind of a mystery. It's kind of in the air on what I would do. But I still really do like this image of like final chapter being Sansa. Maybe you could have an epilogue of like, you know, Alora Frey 1,000 years in the future, acolyte at the Citadel or something, like seeing where everything is in the future. But this is the idea is the last moment of the story would be Sansa, like, and it was also just influenced by how Dying of the Light ends. It's such a simple ending that I liked it so much that I was like, oh, all of his stories need to end something similar to that fashion, you know. But that's what was on my mind. How problematic is Ygritte forcing herself on Jon? Um, let's go back to this. When's the first? Let's see. I'm trying to think when the first time. Let's see. Do we want to get into Jon's? How can I find when he? I don't know if Ygritte really forces her. I mean, in the show, there's a little more of it, but like, um, so here's the the paragraph of how of them first getting together. Let's see here. It's his body had played the part eagerly enough, his lips on hers, her hand sliding under her doeskin shirt to find his hand sliding under her doeskin shirt to find a breast. His man had stiffened when she rubbed her mound against it through their clothes. My vows, he thought, remembering the werewood grove. But his fingers were undoing the laces and his tongue was in his mouth. So it sounds like she was she kissed him. I'm trying to remember. Oh, I have no choice, he told himself the first time when she slipped beneath his sleeping skins. If I refuse her, she will know me a turncloak. I'm playing the part that Half Hand told me to play. Um, so look, the Egret slips under his blanket and kisses him, and he said his body played the part eagerly enough. Like he didn't. I don't. She might. The idea is that like even the kissing, like was there consent with that? Um, I would say like it sounds like she never received any signal that what she was doing was wrong, um, and so uh, you know we're getting getting into these like things about like what is affirming consent and things like this. Like, um, look, she went under his bed, she went under his blanket. He didn't push her away. She kisses him. He doesn't push her away. He has sex with her. Okay. Um, so I don't think there's a forcing. I don't think Egret's been is forcing herself on John. Um, he John is the one that feels obligated to do it, um, because he's trying to play the role and feel. She has no idea that he's a plant. Had she known he was a plant and she was abusing the power, that would have been a different situation. But like she doesn't know that he's a plant, so she's not abusing. Like she does have power over him, and he feels obligated to have sex with her, but she doesn't know that. So she thinks that like this is a regular consensual um, sexual relationship. So I don't think we can really blame Egret for anything. Um, John, it's just John feels like he had to do this because he was trying to infiltrate their group. So it's more the John's, like I don't know. I'm trying to even think about John's morality in that situation. He's the one that's, I guess, leading her on and things like that. So I don't know. I don't think Egret's done anything wrong. Um, he never says no. He never pushes her away. Um, there's no disapproval of any type. So you know, Egret's in the clear. John's morality we'd have to analyze more. Um, he's the one like faking who he is for pretending to be somebody else. Of course, we all pretend to be somebody else to be. There's this weird situation. There was a case in Israel where a Muslim guy lied about being Jewish in order to sleep with a woman, and then the next day, once she found out he was Muslim, she like called the police, and I think he got convicted of rape, because he lied to her about his religious affiliation. Um, but the thing is, like, I remember this coming out, and everybody being like, but doesn't everyone lie to some degree? And because there's this gray lie, like we all pretend to be a better person than we are, right? We keep our bad thoughts to ourselves, and we say our good thoughts. We try to pretend to be, more moral, and good natured than we are. And of course, don't we all, like, when we apply for jobs, don't we also like present our resume, like, to a point that's not exactly truthful, to our own abilities. Like, we're not confident of our abilities, but we write a very confident resume. So there are these weird ideas about like what point does lie become deception. Um, anyway, Yo, I'd tune in for Reservation Dogs chat. Who's your fave dog? Um, I mean, I think besides William Knife Man, does he count? But I would say that I've got to choose uh, Willie Jack. Willie Jack's got to be the um, best character. But I think I like her the most just also because I mean, going on Reservation Dogs, like Reservation, but for those that haven't watched it, Reservation Dogs is a show about American Indian characters in Oklahoma living on a reservation. Um, and it's very much in the tradition of the movie Smoke Signals, which is, if you've never seen Smoke Signals, you need to watch the movie Smoke Signals. It's the most important movie for American Indians that has ever been produced. And so something like Reservation Dogs, even though it's not the perfect show, it's a very, very important show because um, everyone, like the people writing, producing, acting, they're all indigenous, Native American, American Indian, First Nation people. And so you get ideas and perspectives that you've never seen before. It's one of the most educational shows I've ever seen. But Smoke Signals was just also just the amount of impact Smoke Signals had on people, on the American Indian community, because it was a movie written, produced, directed, acted in by American Indians, putting forward like ideas that you just like the rest of America. It's so odd because it's like American Indians are right there. We know nothing about them. Nothing. We know nothing about them. Stuff that was just like, what? It's just random. And so what I love about Willie Jack is that she's just that character. Of she feels like she's from the res, and she feels like she feels of the res in the way she talks, the way she acts, things like that. Um, it's a really good show. Um, I definitely have some criticisms of it too, but like it's a really good show. But but yeah, I really enjoyed it too. But there's just so many little things about it. Like someone was pointing out, like, so in the first season, they end up stealing this truck and they get this like massive supply of something called uh, um, what are the chips from Reservation Dogs? They call them flavor flamin' flavors, right? Flamin' flavors or something. Flaming flamers. And there's this weird scene where they're all eating flaming flamers, these like spicy chips, for the first few episodes, and one of the characters has a stomach ache. And to any white character watching the show, you're like, oh, teenage girl with a stomach ache. She's preggers, right? Like you're just like, oh, she's like, oh, I feel sick. I think I want to throw up. Apparently, every American Indian watching the show is like, too many chips, too many hot spicy chips. Like every American Indian like got it. And that was the joke. And they were trolling us. It was in the show. She just ate too many of the chips. And apparently American Indians are really into spicy Cheetos. And it's just one of these random things where you're like, what? Like who knew that about oh no, American Indians are just really into like flaming Cheetos. Oh, like I would have never gotten that. But like, and that was such an interesting joke to play that like, we're going to put this joke in that every white person's going to think she's pregnant. And every American Indian's going to be like, she ate too many flaming flamers. It's just so weird. So there's aspects of that I thought were really, really interesting and educational about the whole experience. And, but it's I'm very happy I watched it. I think everybody should watch it. Everybody should watch Smoke Signals first, and watch. I mean, Smoke Signals is a fucking great movie, but season one is season one's the best, but it's good stuff. Um, hmm. Relating to upbringing and bias, how do some families end up with such stark different beliefs based on your travels? Is that more common in the U.S.? Um, hmm. No, I wouldn't say that like America is particularly like, even though in America we talk about right now how half of our country is living in a conservative bubble and half is living in a liberal bubble, and they have completely different like beliefs on things like what happened on January 6th and stuff like that, and you're just like, how do you come to such very different beliefs that you know one group looks at January 6th and sees people trying to break into the Capitol and overthrowing the government, and another group can look at it and be like, no, they were just visitors, or whatever. Um, it, it is tough. I've certainly come across like, but still, like traveling the world, like you run into people with some of the craziest, most fucked up beliefs I've ever like run into. Where I'm just like, whoa, you make an American look, you know, uh, so learned and accepting. Um, and I don't know what I don't know what makes Americans a little different. I mean, Americans are a little different from a lot of the world in that we have so much pop culture and so much TV and movie poisoning us and like changing us, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the better. But um, we at least have these things to sort of like check us on our beliefs. Um, like should take something like the Civil War. So in a lot of America, people believe that the Civil War was caused by states' rights, and most of America understands that the Civil War was because of slavery. Um, but at the same time, there's still movies. We have these discussions in the news. We have movies. These issues come up, and then they end up getting debated. Um, and so there ends up being some reconciliation. When I run into other places, I'm really surprised sometimes, like where like when I lived in China, you know, Chinese people's beliefs about America or Japan specifically, they're just like, we're just out of left field. I'm just like, where did you learn that? But they don't have anything to correct them. They have no one to say like, no, this is not how things are. This is not what people believe. You know, like for instance, in China, most Chinese people believe that like the Taiwanese want to join China and that America's stopping them. And you're like, that is the dumbest, like most wrong thing I could think. But there's no media telling them the opposite. Um, uh, I actually recently heard from a friend he's living in Israel, and he was talking about how like you don't get the same sort of like media in Israel questioning the war that you would say if you were in Europe, especially, which um, so I don't know. I guess these biases come when I want to say when you're just not exposed to other people. It tends to be that liberal people are from cities and conservative people are from the countryside, because I guess countryside you don't run into people that are different from you. You don't run into new ideas that like make you go, huh, that's weird. Um, it's like just no one's ever said like stopped them and said, well, wait a minute, maybe that's a wrong idea. Um, yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like another good example of like something like you've never questioned. Like uh, imagine, for example, like, I'm just going to choose a random crass one. Like, imagine someone like came to you and was like, you shouldn't be using toilet paper. Like, your first reaction would be like, but everyone I know uses toilet paper. I've always used toilet paper. Toilet paper seems like a very logical thing to use. Like, what? But no one has ever questioned that. Like, no, you should actually be using the 3 shells or whatever they use in fucking Demolition Man, or or whatever. But it doesn't. But the idea is, like, no one has ever in your entire life on this planet like questioned this very basic fundamental thing. And so you like, if you've never been questioned, of course you're going to have a bias. Like, if you've never thought about, we're talking about like switching silverware. If you've never thought about switching hands with your silverware, why would you ever like think that there was another way? I mean, that one's not very important, but some people are never questioned. They go their entire lives and are never questioned. Um, like I told you, when I went on that Birthright Israel trip, my roommate had never ever, like, no one in his 23 years on earth had ever presented him as Palestinians being like human beings. And he was like, oh, thank you for, like, showing me that perspective. Just it's amazing that people can, but I think that's just it. It's just you're not exposed to stuff. um like, when I lived in the Middle East, when I lived in Jordan, the Jordanians didn't believe I was an atheist. Like, they're just like, it was so confusing to them because they'd never run into one. They were just like, what? How? No, I think secretly deep down you are. And I'd be like, no, I'm an atheist. No. Like, it was just so out of left field that they were just, um, calling it now, Bran works into Ethan to be a point of view character in the past to solve the R plus helical situation. They're both 9-year-old northern boys. Huh. That would be an interesting perspective to be in. Like, why Ethan? That he's the same age. He's like, can I live as Ethan my entire life? And he's with him like the entire time, all the way up to the Tower of Joy, and then gets killed, gets sent screaming back to his body. That would be something. That would be something. But again, like, I don't, Bran hasn't, except for Hodor, he hasn't learned to take anybody else. Huh. Have you seen The Boy and the Heron? Thoughts? It's my favorite Miyazaki film. His themes remind me of George's, especially Princess uh, Mononoke. Um, I've seen Princess Mononoke, and what are the others? I've seen Spirited Away. I've never seen the the Boy and the Heron. Let me look it up real quick. Oh, it just came out. No wonder. Um, Based on a novel of the same name. Pacific War. Loses his mother in a hospital fire. And then, oh, interesting. Oh, I don't want to give it away to people, but um, but yeah, I should probably watch this soon. I mean, everybody brings up Miyazaki, so I feel like I feel like I'm obligated to see this. But no, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. In fact, I've largely forgot Princess Mononoke. Um, I've largely forgotten the plot of that. It's been so long. I realize it's been like 20 20 years since I've seen that. Oh man. Um, um, at what point do you think the Faceless Men kill for service sacrifice to strictly killing for money. Waste dad gave everything he owned. Euron got the Squiddy King for an egg he placed no value in. Well, obviously, we don't know if that latter part is true. We don't know if Euron really gave up an egg to the Faceless Men. It doesn't, it means he lied about dropping it in the sea, but was truthful in saying that he had it. I mean, if he's a proven liar, maybe he's lying about having it, but nonetheless, I think what George is saying, first of all, George is the biggest hater of religion, in the world. So like, no religion that is going to be portrayed in the story is going to be a good one. Another like all-powerful shut-in is of course Tough from Tough Voyaging, and like the majority of that story is about the religious fanatics that want to fill the universe with life and can't stop breeding and are a bunch of like zealots. He hates zealots. He writes about zealots being the worst. And so he obviously thinks that the Faceless Men are not only evil because they're nihilists, and he hates nihilism, but he probably hates them because he's probably going to call them fucking hypocrites. Like the Faceless Men, like, oh, we believe in this and this. No, you're doing all this just for money or whatever. And though, I'd like to see like the Kindly Man. They should really have like a scene where the Kindly Man is like partaking in some luxury with all of the money that he's spending from his to be like the telemarketers, or not the telemarketers, the televangelists with their call for wealth, not living the Christian life of poverty, the proper Christian life of poverty. But I imagine it's he's talking about it in the sense that it's just like hypocrisy, but it might also just be, maybe it's money for whatever their goal of ending the world or whatever. But that's another possibility. But I think they're just gonna, they're just gonna take as much money as they can. They're all in it for the cash. Religion is, yeah, I mean, I guess that's two different things. It's either they're in it for the cash and they're a bunch of hypocrites, and they're not really thinking about what people can afford and what's appropriate and what's like what fits with the religion, or they're just looking for the money because they have some sort of grand nihilist plan to destroy the world or something. Okay. This is a good question. Hey, Preston, can you explain the Asha fragment scene where Asha, and possibly Asha alone, is the person that comes across the phrase? Also, what's up with that armor? One of them is rocking. Okay, so the armor part is the easier question, is the easier thing. So in the Asha fragment, we have Asha watching the Frey army approach, and we know that one of the men, and she thinks this is the standard bearer, who is usually a squire, by the way, is holding the head of Mor's Umber. Ironically, this is probably Hosteen Frey, like riding out first with the head. And in reverse, she thinks the commander is the one with this large helm that has on it the twin towers of Frey, like built into the helm. We actually see this helm. It's in A Clash of Kings, and I'll bring up the chapter. There's a lot of significance to this. It's Where was it? Now I'm gonna have to search this. Because it's definitely if only I could find it. It's in a Clash of Kings, like Bran observes Big and Little Walder, like with their armor, and at some point, um, we let's see here. Let me find it. At some point, we hear about Big Walder's helm, and it's that helm. It's one of those random things that comes back. Fashioned in the the but he has a helm like that, and so the idea is that Asha is mistaking the 10-year-old boy for the commander, and she's mistaking the standard bearer for she's mistaking Hosteen, who is the commander, for the standard bearer for being the squire. So she swapped them, and it's a bit of an interesting parallel because Big Walder is a 10-year-old boy that she's mistaken as this important knight leading someone into battle, which is very reminiscent of Barristan, who, of course, Barristan the Bold being this like named after like when he was 10-year-old hidden in armor. And so everyone assumed that Barristan was this adult hidden in armor, but in fact he was a little boy. And so Big Walder has a Barristan the Bold situation going on with his armor. Maybe if I search for the word crest, I was like having trouble finding it. It's definitely in here in a Bran chapter or something. And so we know that yeah, what she's looking at is here we go. Ah, there it is. Fucking found it. It was the word crest. Bran 2, A Clash of Kings. The Walders were mounting up. They'd brought fine armor up from the twins, shining silver plate with enameled blue chasings. Blue Walder's crest was shaped like a castle, while Little Walder favored streamers of blue and gray silk. So it's right there that this is Big Walder's helmet. And so it's so now why is Asha? So that's the deal with the armor. Is the armor is Little Walder. So also Big Walder. So a lot of people also like believe kind of ridiculously that Little Walder murdered Big Walder. I'm sorry, that Big Walder murdered Little Walder. And I'm like, because he wants to be heir to the twins and stuff. And you're just like, why would you murder like the 50th person in line? It gets you nowhere. And in fact, the murder leads to a fight breaking out and the Freys being ejected from the castle and Big Walder heading into battle. Like the boy is probably going to get killed. Like there's no like reason, this idea that, oh, he murdered his cousin because he wanted to, move up the line of succession is just one of the silliest like ideas that I've heard. like, so, and it just doesn't work because he's actually getting sent out and he's probably going to get killed in this battle because of because if that were his actions, if he actually murdered, because the murder of little Walder ejects them, right? Which is why, like, it just makes more sense for it to have been Ramsay, because Ramsay wanted them ejected. Like, it makes sense with Ramsay, it doesn't make sense with Big Walder. But yes, the person in the armor is Big Walder. Now, why is Asha standing alone, looking at the phrase? Well, we don't know. I mean, the idea is that maybe she's in a line of people, like awaiting battle. Maybe she's on a horse, observing the whole thing. I mean, the Stannis does say that the Ironborn are supposed to fight for them, but it's funny because it's like there's like 9 of them, so like, how much can they really add to the battle? But nonetheless, he needs the people. So I imagine to throw Asha on a horse, and she's supposed to be in battle with them, and she's just the person to observe everything, because we're probably not going to have Theon observe the battle, for various reasons. There might be a swap out of Theon for Karstark, or whoever, because Karstark is old, and the idea is that an old man would look like Theon, so they could kill an old man and everyone would think they're killing Theon, was the idea. So you kind of need Asha's perspective, so you throw Asha in the battle. Why not? And so I think she's just like there observing the charge. She's probably next to the other Ironborn, would be my guess, and that this is what she's seeing. All right, corn. Yes, corn. The Raven's Teeth idea rocks, but Bran asks Coldhands who he is, and he says, "I'm your monster, Brandon Stark." I think he's saying his name is Brandon rather than addressing Bran. Time traveling Bran, maybe? Yeah, maybe. I think about like monster with regards to like abomination, with the prologue, with the greatest abomination is the warging of human beings, according to Vermeer Sixskin's mentor. So I mean, it could be that the monster would be referring to the person receiving the warg rather than the person doing the warg, things like that. But I mean, you're right. It could just easily be time traveling Bran, like animating everything. If time traveling Bran like controls everything. Funny how perspective alters certain events in the reader's eyes. Oxcross is seen as great, but it's really a 15-year-olds being slaughtered by knights. Yeah, these are all of these kind of situations. I mean, Rob being a 15-year-old boy and stuff like this, and they used to write about the kings of England and stuff leading people into battle when they're like 12 and stuff, and I don't know how these things are possible. I understand that like people were expected to be adults sooner back then, but at some point you're like, come on, you're like 12, you're 15, like how adult can you be? But nonetheless, somehow this society sees like, well, they're kind of hypocritical, right? But they have like 16 being the age of majority, but then they throw people into battle younger than that. And I think George is making this statement about even today with like, we send 18-year-olds off to die, but we still think 18-year-olds are kids, and there's this contradiction. And this contradiction, I guess, has existed for a long time, considering that, Romeo and Juliet deals with the same contradiction where Juliet's father thinks she's far too young for marriage, even though he was married at the same age, stuff like that. Glass flower doesn't read red. The vegetable character straight up loses, and then It's completely forgotten. Um, yeah, the George does have a Glass Flower is a very interesting, very beautiful story. It is um a late story that he wrote. I think it's written in 86 or 87. It's his final Thousand Worlds story that he ever writes because he never finishes Avalon. Um, it's it's one that's it's so ambitious that I don't even know if George understands like how beautiful and meaningful and in depth the story he's created is about like the nature of consciousness and what it is and what it means to be what like who someone is, like memory, consciousness, the essence of a character, an essence of who we are as our souls. It's a crazy story. It's a beautiful story. It's the contest though, specifically when you're talking about like the different characters, like who wins and who loses. Um, it is almost uh, random. You know, like it's not that the good characters win or the evil characters win. It's like certain characters do okay and certain characters don't. You know, kind of randomly. Um, there's no like, there's no story justice in it at all. Other than I mean, the protagonist kind of a situation is different, but like the other characters that body swap, there's no rhyme or reason to why certain ones win and certain ones lose. Um, you know, who's good and who's evil. You know, like the greatest victim of that story, I think, is like a winged like demon creature, and who's captured as a slave, and he gets a new body, freaks out, and jumps off a wall and dies. And you're like, oh god, because he doesn't even understand what's going on. He like jumps out the window and dies immediately, and you're like, well, like the brutalized, like enslaved, like flying creature, like dies. That shouldn't have been his fate, but it was, you know? So George does just do kind of random stuff for either a joke or interesting, to be interesting, or to show how cruel and random the actual world is. He also likes to subvert expectations, and he'll, you know, keep us surprised. There's a interesting story that he wrote very late called A Night at the Tarn House. And in that story, you're really expecting certain characters to survive. And instead, a kind of random, um, like cowardly character that has really no, he's not particularly evil. He's not particularly good. He's just kind of cowardly. And he ends up being the survivor of the story. And it's just kind of, you're like, oh, well, that was unexpected. You know, it's one of those kind of things. So, you know, George has a lot of stories. He does try to mix it up. So, you know, I try to, you know, I read all his stuff looking for patterns, but he does mix stuff up so much. So, um, Egret blackmails John on fear of death for sex specifically. I have to look this up, but I mean, I thought I was reading the first moment where John and Egret had sex, um, but maybe maybe not. I mean, you know, or maybe it's later on or something. He doesn't want to do it as much or something, and I'm not sure. Um, I have to reread this, but nonetheless, I mean, even if we accept that 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 Egret is uh, is forcing John into a sex situation, That's all the characters in our story. Like any first of all, arranged marriages are are forced sex, right? And so in a sense, every arranged marriage in this world is problematic in that sense. But you know, the wildlings are not put on any sort of pedestal as the best society. John might think that, but you know, these are also like a society that murders children. You know, so like they're not they're and actually like condones kidnapping and rape as like marriage, you know. I mean, it's supposed to be a problematic society to begin with. But I have to reread the like the quote of like where she actually like um uh where she tries to blackmail him. Um uh, uh, back in the okay. Finally getting close to the end, getting close. Oh, good, good. Theory on how the seashells work in Demolition Man. I mean, I imagine that like the first seashell is a. I imagine a first seashell. If I'm really thinking about it, like obviously they probably didn't think about it through, but like the first seashell is probably like the actual like scooping of the feces, you know, to get the major feces out. The second seashell is probably like uh, a water cleaning one, and because it's the future, maybe the third seashell is like a disinfectant, like a you know, like a uh, um, you know, now we use you know, in the world we use the disinfecting wipes and hand sanitizer, so it's probably like a sanitizer would be my guess. So the first one is like for the majority of the waste. The second one is for like the wash of the remainder waste, and then you have like a sanitizing shell would be my guess of the third one. The three. He doesn't know how to use the three shells. Thank you, Uncle Magic. um. Okay. Opinion on death of author regarding INF and lit in general. Um. I'm not sure INF, but on death of author is a is of course like I don't. It's something I've been thinking about. I think about actually quite a bit. Um, um, because what an author's like authors lie when you actually ask them about what they meant on stuff, and even if an author didn't intend for something to be, that doesn't necessarily mean that that piece of work doesn't have that role. You know. Um, so like take that off, take the guy that wrote um that Rich Men North of Richmond, right? And you know, he kind of like he writes this whole there's this whole verse on uh, welfare queens, like and he's trying to say that like, oh, he didn't actually mean to like trash people in welfare and stuff like that. And you're like, but that's what you fucking wrote. Like it's right there. How are you supposed to not interpret that? And that's clearly what people listening to the song are interpreting it as. So in a sense, like he could be lying, but also even if he's not lying, does it matter? Because that's what the lyrics are, you know. Um the Baby It's Cold Outside. Did you guys I'd like to talk. Yeah, Baby It's Cold Outside is a really interesting one as well. Um, This is important though, because people bring this up every Christmas. And right now, like the song, you don't hear it as much in the past few years because of it. But there's okay. So like things changing meaning. Da, 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 da. So there's this the line of, where is it? Drink? Here we go. So the neighbors might think, baby, it's bad out there. Say, what's in this drink? No cabs to be had out there. I wish I knew how. You know, this is the idea that this line, say, what's in this drink? And everybody's like, oh, this is a really problematic song. He's like spiked your drink. And even if he hasn't spiked your drink, she's had too much to drink. And it's not noble for him to be having sex with this woman who's drunk, you know? And so now, like, we hear this, and this is the line we hear. And this is how we in a modern sense, like people like think this. But however, that's not what was thought at the time. Like this line, like at the time, if a woman, because they because women were supposed to be chaste, right? But actually women truly wanted to have sex because everybody wants to have sex, that women would look for an out. And the out was, say, what's in this drink? Oh no. And then she'd have sex, right? So in a sense, like, this was her actually lying. There's nothing in the drink. Like, she's purposely saying that to give herself an excuse to stay, right? And this was actually like a somewhat common phrase at the time. You know, you say what's in this drink, and it means like, no, there's nothing in the drink, but you know, she wants to have sex, and so she needs an excuse. So she makes the excuse. So it's really, the original meaning is that this is a liberated woman who lives in a sexist world, and she's using this line to, you know, to do what she wants, which is have sex with this guy. Like, this is the whole point of the story. The whole point of the song is she wants to fuck, and how is she gonna fuck? She's gonna be like, what's in this drink? Boom, right? This is the whole point. But we read it now and we're like, oh, what's in this drink? The guy has spiked your drink. He's taking advantage of her. So we get this like death of the author thing. Like, does author intention matter? And like, it does. But also, like, does modern interpretation matter? Yes, it does. And so you have to look at both, and you have to weigh them. You know, obviously, like, you know, people are going to keep misinterpreting that line, so we can't sing that song as much as going forward. You're going to hear that song less and less and less until it disappears, even though it was originally like, it's actually an empowerment song, about a woman doing what she wants to do. But, you know, whatevs. So it's this odd thing about, like, I mean, you also see it with like J.K. Rowling, like retconning stuff in her story that she clearly did not intend, but just like saying it like, oh, that's my intention. Or George Lucas with his fucking monomyth, James like Campbell, like hero's journey bullshit. Like that's like the greatest example of like an author just like retroactively like changing the meaning of his story. It was not his intention at the time. He, all of a sudden, it started appearing in interviews like a decade later. You know, does it matter? Well, I don't know, you know, if you want. I mean, the cool thing about art is you can interpret it as you want. It changes. It changes with time. Um, like I'm not any sort of originalist when it comes to like literature. Like literature is going to change, and it's going to change with time, and we're going to reinterpret it over and over and over again, and that's the fun of it. Um, reinterpret the um, our politicians and people in history and things like that, and that's the whole thing about growth. It's growth as a society, that we have to reinterpret everything. So I mean, I guess like looking at author intention at the time is important. It's a factor, but yeah, no, it's all about the piece of art lives on and becomes something else beyond what the author intended. It can't be contained. It's impossible to contain it. One, because the author. I mean, we're not islands. You know, art is meant to be interpreted by others. You know. Do you think Dany would have broken her engagement to his daughter if Oberyn showed up in Meereen instead of Quentyn? Uh, this is this funny question, right? Like, if Barristan even thinks that had Garrus Drinkwater been the person rather than Quentin, it would have been different. I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, like you look at Dany and you're like, well, she's a 16-year-old girl, you know. But on the other hand, you want Dany to be a little more deep than that. Like, is Dany is the summary of like Dany's problems with Meereen and her conflict there? Can it all be summed up with Dario and like a girlish romantic, girlish desire for romance? You know, is that the summary of like everything Daenerys is made of? Like, if an actual like super sexy dangerous man showed up that was like even more dangerous and sexy than Dario, would she be like, oh, that's all I need, you know? And I'd like to say no. I'd like to say that Dany is about more than that. You know, if she's really about like, breaking chains and freeing people and ending slavery and things like that, and being people's mothers and stuff like that, that I don't think it matters who would have shown up. I'd like to believe that she would have come to that same sort of conclusion, that she needs to stay, regardless, that it wasn't weighed against her sexual desires, her passion for Dario, which is never really established as anything more than physical. At no point does she ever like say, yeah, just fucking love Dario's personality. I mean, she likes that he's dangerous. I guess that's part of his personality, but it's not like they're connecting over anything, where at least that hasn't been established. I don't know. So I'd like to think that, that even if we take something like Missandei, and like her desire to protect Missandei and her desire to protect little girls, like she was denied a childhood, therefore she wants to like give little girls childhoods, like, and protect them. Like, one would think that would be a stronger motivator than her libido, and that is more than that. I mean, I understand that Barristan doesn't think it's more than that, but Barristan is also a fucking idiot. So like, yeah, we have Barristan's perspective, but Barristan is a fucking idiot on so many things, and he doesn't understand anything about love. I mean, the dude was, so I'd like to believe that like it was that Dany would have made the same decisions Um, uh, you know, no matter if Quentin was somebody sexier, you know. Um, Septon Celador tried to marry Tyrion to Tysha. Yeah, I want to say I think he did, and then they had it. Was it annulled? This was the Oh, this is the theory that Septon Celador is the Septon. Oh, because he was a drunken Septon. Okay. Now I'm getting this. So Septon Celador is the Septon at the wall who's a drunk. And the joke is he's actually so drunk at one point that he so thoroughly forgets who he is that he becomes Septon Shale at one point. There's a goof in A Dance with Dragons where John during the wedding of the Fen to Alice Karstark, Septon Celador comes out of the Sept, but George R. R. Martin fucks up and calls him Septon Shale. Septon Shale is the one who was dropped down the well and drowns in a Clash of Kings, or maybe swims to safety. Who we don't know. This idea that Septon Celador was so drunk that he became Septon Shale, like an incredible amount of drunkenness. But this idea that Septon Celador married Tyrion to Tysha, and that's the reason he had to take the black and go to the wall. I mean, I suppose. Well, the thing is, here's the problem with this theory. Tyrion is at the wall for days. At some point, and the Night's Watch, they eat collectively. So at some point, Tyrion would see the Septon like in the cafeteria, in the food hall, and be like, fuck, that's the Septon that fucking married me to Tysha. I mean, granted, it's been many years, but he'd be like, something's off about that guy. Who is that guy? Oh, fuck. That's Septon. Oh, my God, that's Septon Celador. You know? So that's I mean, I get it. Like, Septon Celador was a drunk. It was a drunken Septon that married Tyrion to Tysha, but that's Tyrion was there. He would have shit his pants if it was the same Septon, or he would at least would have thought about it. He would have been like, the Septon that married us was sent to the wall, and then he would have been like, I wonder if I'm going to run into him, and then he'd run into him. I mean, that's the problem. He would totally. Oh man. Hey there, this is my first super chat. I wanted to start reading A Song of Ice and Fire. Should I go for the audiobooks or fan reads? David reads A Song of Ice and Fire. So A Song of Ice and Fire, the normal the audiobooks are done by Roy Dotrice. Roy Dotrice is a old British actor who worked with George on a series called Beauty and the Beast. He's very good at creating a lot of different voices. And so what's really fun about it is that, he puts a lot of character into many different voices. He supposedly can do like 120 voices, but though realistically he can do like 40, which is still great, more than anybody else can do. Okay, so Roy Dotrice does a really good job. He gets older and older as time goes on, so his A Dance with Dragons is not as good as his a Game of Thrones or as a Clash of Kings. But nonetheless, they're good. I highly recommend like the Roy Dotrice versions. Now, David reads The Song of Ice and Fire. Obviously, it's free, um, and David is not bad. He's pretty good. You occasionally hear his cat in the background, um, and for me, he's a little slow. So I put him on when if I do listen to David, and I do, I'll put him on a little faster speed, like a 1.5 or a 1.25 speed, depending on the chapter. But I mean, that's obviously the advantage is that David reads A Song of Ice and Fire is right here on YouTube, and it's free, and he does a good job. So I mean, I think they're both, strengths to both of them. But yeah, I would. But I think Roy. I think you should definitely listen to the Roy Dotrice version at some point. Um, just because there's a lot of jokes that also fans have with each other where we kind of like, because he pronounces things weirdly and differently. So for instance, he'll say Patire Baelish and Brian and stuff like that. Where are what? Let's see. Hold on a second. I'm trying to get Cardizzle.
What the hell are you doing still awake?
Yeah, I'm gonna go to bed soon. Luckily, I took a
Dude,
nap this afternoon.
you took a nap? That's good, man. That's
Well,
good.
my boy needed a nap, and so I was like, "Come on, I'll get you." Because he was like, "I don't need a nap." I was like, "Just lie down with me for a minute." It's like, okay, and the trick worked. I got him to fall asleep, but I also fell asleep myself. So
We got to, now that you're back, we got to get to work on some stuff. We got to do some podcasts. We got to do another game. We got to do a bunch of shit, dude. We have to catch up on so much.
yeah, no. So Carmine, like before we went to break, I was like, I'm going to Wisconsin. I brought my mic, and I was like, anything we want to record, let's do it. And he's like, all right, let's do it. And then he's like, yeah, sorry, I got Baldur's Gate 3, and I spent the whole Christmas holiday doing Baldur's Gate
It's
3,
so good. It's so
and
fucking
so I was
good.
like,
Anyone
all right,
anyone who plays it knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's so fucking good. You can make not only can you make your own character, but you can also make your own there's a side character who comes to you in dreams. So I made her like a big, tall, muscular Daenerys Targaryen, and
yeah.
that's my guardian. That's my dream visitor.
Mm, mm, mm. Oh, this is back. We're talking about you've been here for a lot of is
Yes,
Egret a
Ross and his horny posts with the John Egret stuff.
when John is talking to Mance about joining the Wildlings, he gets in on the back of Egret. That's true. Egret's recommendation, not rape, grooming. Um, so these are these weird. I mean, we don't. So I think I've recently been seeing. This is kind of a little tangent about how younger generations kind of feel about sex. So like the amount of people engaging in sex and like and everything and having options about sex like has like been going down, and people don't have a good like general opinion about sex. And I think there's a lot of people that like view sex naturally through like now because of so many discussions of like power dynamics and taking advantage of people and everything negative about sex like as a first thing, rather than just viewing sex as something that like people like to do because it's fun. um so I mean, look, Egret's what, 16 years old, John's 15 years old. um she's a little girl, he's a little boy. She liked a little boy and asked Mance Raider not to kill him because she liked him. And then she fucked him. I don't think like in any sort of sense you could like argue that this was some sort of like groomer or there was some like she should have known the power dynamic or something like this. She's a little girl. Um, and she just wanted to fuck. And and if John were not a plant and he didn't want to fuck her, he had plenty of opportunity to not fuck her. Um, like these things like, you know, I don't think that John was put in any situation that he couldn't have gotten out of if he hadn't put himself in a dishonest position, you know. So um I don't know. You're younger than me, Carmine. How do you think your generation thinks about sex?
Millennials, that's a really tough question. It's actually a mixed bag. Whenever I thought about this question in the past,
Yeah.
I always look at like how the previous generations thought about it, but no, every generation, millennials, Gen X, uh, uh, whatever the fuck was before Gen X, boomers,
Mm.
everyone was just fucking free and everywhere else. Even the greatest generation, even though they were, I guess, in pictures from your very classy, no, they were freaks too. Every generation
Yeah.
has been freaky.
Yeah, but I mean, I'd like to, there does seem to be this idea that like we're becoming a less sex positive like society, that people are starting viewing sex as like this negative thing. Um, and that's because like you have these situations where you start hearing about like, oh, Thomas Jefferson and taking advantage of 16-year old slave girl and things like this. And so you start just hearing about every instance in the media about Epstein or whatever, like people taking advantage, and then all of a sudden sex is always presented to us in this negative light. And sex isn't a negative thing. Sex is great. Like it's you know John got some good sex, and then his girlfriend got killed.
It's this is a question I would love to ask. I would love to be asked again in like 20 years because
Mm,
as AI is getting better, pretty soon people are going to have start having sex less and less because now they have the perfect AI girlfriend. And then
right,
eventually in
right.
50 years it's going to be like an android robot girlfriend. So if anything, reports have been coming out that my generation and the ones coming up now are having
Mm.
sex less. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, a lot is coming to. It's really interesting reading about like coming generations and their feelings about sex, because there's also those attitudes, but also like there's a growing schism between male attitudes and female attitudes about sex and politics. Um, and women are becoming much more liberal as time goes on, and men are kind of staying in the same place. And we're going to get to a point where like so you got to have the men have to liberalize too, or else they're not gonna be getting their sex, and we're gonna have more of these incels. But I mean, Ross is obviously bringing up like interesting questions in order to sort of debate about this sort of things, but it does reflect on society in general, like how we're supposed to think about these relationships, and you know are they positive or negative or whatever? I don't know. But I don't know. Sex happens. Sex happens, and these are little kids. These are little kids doing stuff. She just liked John. That's it. She liked him, and she wanted to bone him. Um, but I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think about, like, how people now look at romantic comedies, and they look at the dude's romantic comedy antics, and they're like, well, that was harassment, or that was psycho, or whatever. And you're like, yeah, that maybe, but at the same time, like, give it a break. Like, we all do psycho things,
it was a different
like
time back in the day. Like
you've you've never walked a different way in hopes of trying to run into a girl you liked. I mean, like, everybody's fucking done that. Like, come on.
When she tells you she never wants to see you again, you still show up at her house with a
Sure.
boombox above your head.
Mhm. Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
back in the day. Nowadays,
Right. You know, everybody does these things, and I remember, oh my god, I remember a friend of mine. She broke up with her boyfriend, and they had each other's like email passwords, and so she's like, oh my God, after the breakup, he went into my email and he like read my past emails to see if I was like talking to my other ex. And I was like, it's like, isn't that psycho? And it's like, have you never been broken up with? Do you know where your head is? Like it's like I've never done that because I've never shared passwords, but I could, I've definitely been in situations where had I had the password, there's no way I wouldn't be logging in. I wouldn't. My head was not in the right place. Like people are, like just stuff happens. People are weird, imperfect, romantic, psycho people, and some of it has to be kind of like at some point you just got to like normalize imperfection and be like, well, that's kind of what people do. It's what people do. Ygritte liked John, and then she had sex with him. So. What else is going on with you these days, man?
No, it's the winter time, so I'm hibernating. I can't. It's too fucking cold out here. I can't. It's way too fucking cold.
Yeah, yeah.
It's probably colder up there, but it's way too
I
fucking
mean, yeah,
cold
it
out
got
here.
coldest. I think they said around here in DC, it's been like coldest it's been in like over a year because last week
Uh,
was pretty mild.
Real quick, because I know you're going to head to bed soon, and I just want to like get the schedule out so the audience knows.
Mm.
So, you down to do another trivia game where you make the questions, and because I have
Sure,
one
sure, sure,
person
sure.
lined up. She's pretty cool, also a Ice and Fire YouTuber, and I'm down to do it in like the next 24 to 48 hours. We gotta do our top 2023 lists, top five shows. Did we? It feels like we didn't watch anything, but we so did.
We did. I mean, we watched Barry and Loki, and I watched Reservation Dogs, and I watched American Born Chinese. I'm trying to think of a few others I watched, but I have opinions. I have opinions
We
about
watched
what.
Last of Us as well. Remember
Oh yeah,
Last of Us?
Last of Us, right? Last of Us.
Hmm.
No, yeah, yeah. We've watched a few things. Few things. Um, yeah, but what else? What else? Um, the Somebody wrote, "Baby, it's cold outside. It's going to be hard to explain to the next generation. You'll have to explain how it used to get cold outside." um, let's see, real quick. Opinions on the Blackfire. I'm actually almost to the end of my list here, Carmine, if you want to stick around. Opinions on the Bright Flame Blackfire theory. I think there's not much to the theory. My problem with it is it's just like there's nothing to the theory. It's just like, well, Aryan Bright Flame has some missing relatives, and the Blackfires have some missing relatives. Maybe they got together um and they had some kids together, and um, Aegon is a bright flame Blackfire. Like it's not based on anything textual. It's just these people exist. Maybe they got together. Um, and so my problem with it is that it's not really a theory. It's just like, wouldn't it be cool? But of course, like there's a bazillion lost Targaryens that exist. I mean, Sarah Targaryen or whatever. Lots of missing ones. It's just like, yeah, whatever. Like I don't know if it really adds much, like the Aryan Bright Flame thing, but um, because he was just a dude. He was just a dude. Do you prefer Phil Collins or Peter Gabriel? I think Peter Gabriel is much more interesting than Phil Collins. Um, are you talking about in Genesis or just in general? But I think I think I think I'd like Peter Gabriel. I think even Mike and the Mechanics. I might like Mike and the Mechanics more than Phil Collins. Do you know what I'm talking about, Carmine?
I have no idea what you're talking about now.
Oh
I have no
fuck.
idea. I'm sorry.
Do you remember the show Dharma and Greg?
I do. I liked it a lot.
There was one joke in Dharma and Greg that I think was one of the most fucking genius goddamn jokes. Okay, and I remember to this day because it was so fucking funny to me. So Dharma and Greg, they go on a date and they're like, "Hey, let's pretend like we're on a first date." And they're like, "Okay." And she's like, "So what kind of music do you like?" And he's like, "Oh, I like Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel and Mike and the Mechanics." And she goes, you only like people that used to be in Genesis? And he responds, Peter Gabriel was in Genesis? Oh, you're like crickets over there, right? I'm like,
I'm sorry. I guess.
there was a band called Genesis, and it had Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, and the guy Mike, what's his, no one forgot his last name, Mike of the Mechanics. Anyway, Peter Gabriel leaves to go solo, but then after he leaves, Genesis kind of blows up as a band, at least in America, and Peter Gabriel blows up. So like they blew up independently, and then Phil Collins went solo, and Mike and the Mechanics went solo, and so this idea, like, yeah, obviously they'd be playing the same type of music, but an American wouldn't know that Peter Gabriel was like in, like, I don't know, like Genesis from the beginning. It's just kind of funny stuff like that. I don't know. It's fucking weird. Oh my god, but it's like the best joke from Dharma and Greg. Did Carmine pick vulva A or B? What is that?
In the game, you get to pick what your vagina looks like if you play as a woman, or if you make your dream visitor a woman. It's ridiculous. Cyberpunk did the same thing where you can pick how big or small your penis is. It's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. That's utterly
That's
ridiculous.
funny.
It's like I said, I was telling you privately. It's a shame you probably will never play Baldur's Gate 3. It's phenomenal. I'm not a big D&D guy,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it is. It won so many awards this year or last year. It's so good. Very good. Very good.
Thank you, Cap Gang Channel. The video game Genesis was an actual band. I think you mean the video game system Genesis, the Sega Genesis, or like there used to be a porno mag called Genesis. Prog Genesis is the shit, but I love Collins too. Yeah, I mean, um, yeah. Mm. None of it rings a bell, eh? You're too young. This
Yeah,
is the
sorry.
world we live in. Whoa, these are the hands we give. Yeah, there was. It's like like music that eventually went on, like, the progressive stuff from the '80s that eventually became like stuff that would be at the dentist's in the '90s. Like the music at the dentist, or the grocery store. You'd hear that. Now it's kind of gone. No, well.
You've reached the end. So another big announcement. I'm zoning in on, or zoning in on a good streaming service. If this next one, Prism, doesn't work out, then I'll just use OBS and we'll do the Game of Thrones Telltale thing, and I'll play it. And I don't remember it; it's been so long, but I'll just have you make the decisions. And yeah,
Yeah. Genesis gay porn found in the field. Did I tell you? I told you the gay porn story, right?
yes,
My
sir.
gay. The What's funny is I was listening to the radio, and something else, and somebody, like, there was some other story about a guy finding gay porn in a field, and I was like, oh, but I was like, is this just like a regular thing that like happens to people? But yeah, yeah. Um, but I think Genesis was like I think it was a straight one. I'm not sure. I don't know. Now it's Three Doors Down, and as you know, they stink. Yeah, thank goodness, the latest of why this song stinks came out a few weeks ago. It was pretty good, pretty good. But that's like super super specific. Um, Preston stole your story in Thunder. Yeah, the thing is, the story was it went further. It was about a dude like finding the gay porn, and then like the baseball team looking at it, and then two boys like on the team like trying stuff out, realizing they were gay, and then like and then later throwing porn into the field again to like inspire another generation or something strange like that. Yeah, the um I feel like you must have done something else over Christmas, Carmine. That's going to be interesting.
I did a couple of things. Nothing I care to share. You know, I don't really share much about myself, much to the frustration of many people in my life.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Uh,
know.
you,
By the
you,
way, one thing did happen today, actually. The big fish we've been trying to bait in, Mr. Star Wars
mm.
Thurai, he finally responded to me because I called him out. I called him out on Twitter and I said, "You would
I
not
mean,
have liked George."
he got responded to by Mark Hamill too, man.
Oh, dude, that was we got to. You want to talk about that on the podcast? I'll bring Ness on. We'll talk about a bunch of topics, and we got to talk about that on the podcast. It was so dumb because he was using Mark Hamill's likeness as Luke Skywalker for his
Mm.
thing, and he was using AI for it. And someone just asked Mark, "Did this guy ask your permission to do this?" And Mark said no, and he made like a whole 12-minute video where he was tearing up. It was so dumb. God, Jesus Christ!
Well,
For a guy who loves to say he's a manly man, the guy's a bitch. Act like a little bitch. Jesus, it's embarrassing.
people are. I mean, the thing is, I mean, at the end of the day, he's like super. He's going to be super emotionally connected to Star Wars to do this. Like, and I'm
Mm.
talking like you and I are connected to Star Wars emotionally, but like his channel is about Star Wars, and he has to talk about Star Wars every day, all day, and he's going to be very emotionally connected to it. I mean,
Oh, I know.
what? I mean, what if George R. Martin was like Preston Jacobs is a fucking dick? Like how would I
But
handle
that's not what
that?
Mark Hamill said. So, if
Yeah,
hypothetically
it's
speaking,
true.
I'm actually down to have this convo. Even though, by the way, Joel became a
Yeah.
patron recently. Love you, Joel. You're the man. Uh, hypothetically speaking, let's say someone reached out to George on Twitter. Let's say George runs his Twitter, and they asked George, did this man Preston get your permission to do this fanfic? And George goes, no. Would you make a 12-minute video crying about it?
No, I'd probably like not mention it. I'd probably like pretend it didn't happen.
This is actually something a lot of people don't know. So, I got more pushback from Star Wars than he ever has. So the official, this is something a lot of people don't know. I sent you a screenshot of it, I think. The official Star Wars Twitter account a couple years back blocked me briefly on Twitter. They actually
Mm,
blocked me because I was making fun of them because Disney Infinity,
yeah,
Disney
yeah.
Infinity fucking failed. So the official Star Wars channel on Twitter blocked me briefly, but they did, which was a weird feeling. I never mentioned it until now. So, and that was what, 2016, when
Mm,
Twitter had like the star instead of the heart like button.
yeah, yeah.
So, eh, just get over it.
Good times, good times. I mean, have you had any conversation with him? Has he responded to you at all? What happened?
Oh, he responded to another thing. He keeps trying to. I'm gonna trigger you. So there's the new woman named Sadia Khan who's about to direct a Rey Star Wars film. She
Yeah.
said it's time women shape Star Wars, and of
Mm,
course he got triggered by that for some reason, and he was talking to some psychologist, relationship expert woman, and oh, I'm sorry, I messed that up.
mm.
The psychologist's name is Sadia Khan, and he's just doing like red pill shit. And I replied to his video and I said the dude out here doesn't realize the manosphere content is being phased out. And he replied and he said red pill is fucking stupid and anyone who preaches it joins the same demise of the small pp energy. Which okay, cool, you're against the red pill,
Yeah.
but at the same time he kind of pushes it sometimes. It's weird. It's conflicting, but hopefully we can actually get
I
him
see
on
what
for
you're
a
saying.
convo.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But at least he's a little more nuanced, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny though because like my sister made this joke when I was young, where we're watching Return of the Jedi, and I remember being young and watching Return of the Jedi with her, and um there's the line where Obi-Wan says there is another your sister, and Luke goes Leia, and my sister goes, yeah, who else is it going to be? There's no other women in the galaxy. Which,
He did say something interesting that in Bob Iger's memoir, he said how most of the Star Wars fandom is male. I would love to
Yeah.
get some analytics on that, on who watches Star Wars. Because you and I, as YouTubers, we have our own analytics and we can see the
Hmm.
demographics of people who subscribe to us. For
Yeah.
example, 75% of my audience is men.
The same.
And
Which is which
exactly.
is which is pretty good actually. Which is crazy, right? Like for instance, the channel I'm talking about that I love, um,
Man carrying things?
well, I don't know about man carrying things. I haven't looked at his, um, but so I listen to this music channel that I rave about,
Pat?
Pat Finnerty, right?
Hmm.
He showed his statistics. He was 95% male.
Yeah, sounds
Yeah,
about right.
yeah. So the fact that we do fantasy stuff like Game of Thrones stuff, and that we're 25% female is like pretty good, like for the subject matter. Um, so it's
And to put this in perspective for the audience, top geographies, 40% United States,
Hmm.
10% United Kingdom, everybody else Canada, Germany, Australia. In terms of
Scandinavia, yeah, that's the
in
main
terms
thing.
of age, oh, it changed actually. People grew up. 13 to 17 years old, 0%. 18 to 24, 30%. 25 to 34, 50%.
Hmm.
So, I mean, and top subtitles, English, of course, Spanish, French. And to tell the audience how far our analytics go, it even tells you the best time of when your viewers, your subscribers are online. So
Oh
for
yeah,
me, it's around 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's yeah. That's just the case of it. I mean, I think YouTube in general is male skewed because I think women, if they're gonna do social media or whatever, they're probably more into like TikTok or whatever. Um, I think there's a lot of contributing factors like to how you get your numbers. Like the
Hmm.
subject matter, like in general, like fantasy, sci-fi tends to be male dominated. Um, YouTube tends to be male dominated, things like that. So you start getting to these different things. But the thing is, like, you can play to your demographic, or you can just play from the heart of what you believe, and it's all you can do, you know. Like it would stop being enjoyable if I was just like worrying about what brought in cash and what brought in clicks. Like that would just suck. That would just suck. Um, I'm conflicted about whether to play Baldur's Gate 3. The characters look so ugly compared to other games that have beautiful characters. There are more attractive characters that look ugly compared to that some games. What,
Joel.
what, what are you thinking?
I
I
by
haven't
the way,
played it,
Joel
so
Joel sent me a very large message on Patreon, which we
mm.
got to discuss because he is not, he's not like a right wing weirdo. He's not, because we thought he was initially when he started. We thought he was initially, but he's not. He's just has questions and he's curious about our mindset on
Mm-mm.
certain things.
Yeah, some people
And he
want
actually,
arguments for to help solidify beliefs or whatever. Yeah.
well, the problem with Joel here is that he sent me like this whole, big message that he can't put on YouTube donations because it doesn't, there's a limit on words. But I'd like to discuss his large message about like where fantasy and sci-fi and entertainment is going in
Mm.
regards to the whole, yeah, political system and that whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. Um, who's minute winning in mud wrestling, Dr. Oz or Dr. Phil? Dr. Phil is much bigger, but I have a story about that. Um, I was in high school. I was once friends with a guy who was he came in like fifth in state in Maryland. Um, and but he was light. He was a small guy, and of course I'm 6'5", 6'6", even in high school, 195 pounds, And I remember he like wrestled me once, thinking he could like beat me, and like I just like flipped over and was like, "Sorry, dude. Like I can hold you down. Like you could learn as many wrestling tricks as you want." But I fucking weigh more. Okay, this is why there's wrestling classes. You can't undo like if I weigh 70 pounds more than you, You're not fucking beating me in wrestling. And that's the I think that's the thing with Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil. Like Dr. Oz is a big fucking dude, and or, I mean Dr. Phil is a big fucking dude, and Dr. Oz is a tiny little dude. YouTube doesn't give specifics about users, right? No. We don't get anything on individual people, no, but we get demographic stuff on like age, when our videos are getting watched, like what countries they're from, but there's nothing specific. I can't break that down and figure out. I mean, I
Actually,
suppose if you had only 100 subscribers, you could do the work or something.
if you had 100, if you had like 10 subscribers and like five of those people consistently commented all the time, then maybe. But for no, there's nothing on individual people. The analytics are so thorough. It tells us, once again, it doesn't tell individual people, the mass of our all of our subscribers combined. What it tells you, it goes so, it's so thorough, it tells you what other channels people who are subscribed to you are also watching. For example, people who watch me obviously watch Preston, Glidus,
Mm-hmm.
and a couple other channels I don't recognize, but I'm sure they do Ice and Fire content, so that makes a lot of sense. However, there's a new mod tool. So Preston, when I start streaming, you're going to be a mod on
Mm.
my channel, and you can delete people and call them douchebags or whatever. But so if I go over here to, I don't know, Carbon Cube, I click on the little three dots and I can see a new thing called channel activity. Basically, if I click channel activity, I can see every comment he's ever commented on any of your previous streams.
Hmm.
For
Oh, by the
example,
way, Dr. Oz, turns out Dr. Oz is actually pretty big. He's also 10 years younger than Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil's 73. Maybe Dr. Oz wins. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Dr.
but
Oz.
for example, Carbon Cube here, in one of your previous streams, live from DC, the Hot D trailer, he
Hmm.
commented, "I really dislike H Bomber." So
Hmm.
YouTube is constantly changing to give us more. Can any mod do this? Yes, any mod can do this, Jackie. So it's a new mod
Yeah.
tool that you get. Pretty cool. But YouTube is ever evolving and changing. So
Yeah. Um Now I played the original Baldur's Gate.
oh,
Um right? The one where it's a top down. I don't know what Baldur's Gate 3 looks like. Does it look like
looks like a modern game. Looks fine. I wouldn't say modern actually. I've seen games that look better, but it looks
Okay, so
okay.
it looks um like you're behind the character. You're not like Baldur's Gate 1, you're above the characters.
You can be above in this one too. The camera is very free.
Okay. Um I remember Baldur's Gate, and I played the whole thing and was pretty addicted to it, but I remember it actually used the rules of
Dungeons and
D&D.
Dragons.
Yeah,
hmm
the actual
This too.
proper rules, you know.
This
Um
does too. Do you remember any of the characters from Baldur's Gate 1?
no, Baldur's Gate is based on Forgotten Realms, right?
I have no idea. I don't know
Uh,
nothing. I know
okay,
nada.
so in Dungeons and Dragons, there um eventually they started coming up with campaign worlds, campaign universes that you could supposedly like that you could set your universe in, right? So
Mm.
um, you can choose the Dragonlance universe, you can choose the Spelljammer universe, you can choose the Dark Sun universe. I think they stopped Dark. I think they canceled Dark Sun because it was a world with slavery, and they decided that like, nah, let's not do it. And so Forgotten Realms was one of those universes, and it was one of the more successful ones. And so they ended up making a lot of like novels about the Forgotten Realms universe with different authors and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, the big thing about like why Forgotten Realms was so successful is that the Drow elves were like a big part of Forgotten Realms, and so
Yeah, Drows, Dark Elves. Yeah, they're in this too.
yeah.
The one thing I will say, by the way, that I find very strange is, and this, let me finish my sentence, and people are gonna go, huh? there is no racism amongst the races in this game. For example,
Mm,
if you ever play something like Elder Scrolls Skyrim or even in Lord of the Rings, there's always like animosity between dwarves or elves or human and
mm,
elves and
yeah.
so forth. Even in The Witcher, racism towards elves in The Witcher is like a huge plot point.
Mm,
In this, everyone's just super cool with each other, and it's always like a little
yeah.
weird to me because
Because
human
in
beings are
D&D, racism is
assholes.
built into the game in the original rules. I don't know about the
Hmm.
Forgotten Realms expansion. I imagine it is. I thought everybody hated the Drows. I thought they hated them, but
I can tell Drows are not that liked. I can tell.
yeah. But like it's based it like they I remember like a graph in Unearthed Arcana and stuff like that about like which races feel good about other races and stuff. Like everyone likes halflings because they're just likable, but which peoples hate each other and stuff like that. But yeah,
I can't
there was
tell. I can't, I cannot tell the difference in this game between halflings, dwarfs, and gnomes. I can't tell. I can't.
I mean there's not really any effective difference from the beginning. I mean, just some small little creatures, right?
Hmm.
I mean, I get it now. We've like added this new um, idea. Um, there's a lot. There's actually fun stuff uh, about the history of like why today we think dwarves are a certain way. Like, for instance, the dwarf being the battle axe wielding drunkard at the tavern is not exactly like a Tolkien dwarf, right? Like, and so it's like, where do these ideas come from that a dwarf would be like, you know, and there's like histories. People have like YouTube videos on this, like these histories of like why, like these different ideas of why the D&D elf is a certain way, and stuff like that. Um, in fact, I would say that like even elves aren't really Tolkien-esque anymore. Like the concept of the basic elf um, because like Tolkien elves are a little more la di da, I am an elf, versus like the movie where they're all dour and serious. Um,
I'm sorry, but I love the stuff from Peter Jackson's universe. I love it. So
yeah, but I
good.
mean, it's funny that like the zeitgeist of these like mythical creatures can like change over time, right?
Hmm.
Like a dwarf is going to be this like drinking a pint of ale with his battle axe, being like I hate them elves, they're so stuck up. And you're like, is that because you just want it to be like Gimli? It's Gimli, everybody,
Yeah, even in Lord of the Rings, there's a little bit of that where even Gimli says it in the Council of
Mm-hmm.
Elrond. Never
Right, but
trust an
that's
elf.
that's totally not Lord of the Rings at all.
Hmm.
But what are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do? Oh,
Like
speaking of which, Lord of the
elves are
Rings,
elves are not these serious stuck up like creatures in Lord of the Rings. But
Rings of Power this year. All the shows are coming back this year. The Boys, House of the Dragon. What else? I
yeah, I
had
mean,
a
I would say that like Rings of Power, because it's very Peter Jackson esque, right? Like they're not quite as stuck up as they are in Peter Jackson's um, story, but they're still kind of stuck up.
oh before you. 'Cause I'm sure you're probably gonna bounce soon. There's probably gonna be like one for you.
Yeah.
Echo in 2 days
Oh, fuck, Echo. That's gonna
on
be
the ninth.
fascinating too, man.
On the ninth, Echo. I'm expecting it to be the Andor of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then
Yeah.
Shogun, which I love Shogun. I watched the movie. I thought it was great. The original movie from like way back when, the James Clavell novel.
Yeah, you should read the
Super
book. You
cool.
should read the book sometime. It's really interesting. It's a good book. It's
Believe
a
it or
really good
not,
book.
I took one semester of Japanese in high school eons ago, and
Yeah.
I got through like the first couple of pages. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. I just
Yeah,
never got
no,
back
it
to
was
it.
like a page. It's like a page turner of the '70s, like beach novel. But it's really good because you just feel like you feel like you know a lot more Japanese by the end of the book than when it starts. Um,
That's true.
yeah, Tolkien dwarves are more poetic and almost artsy. Absolutely, absolutely. They're not these like gruff um, Robert Baratheon characters.
We also have the
Quick.
Acolyte, Skeleton Crew,
Oh
X
yeah, everybody's
Men.
been talking about Acolyte. Acolyte's the series of the year, right? The Star Wars series
We'll
of the year.
see. We'll see. The Penguin. There's an Alien show. Ridley Scott's Alien is a show coming for Hulu. Uh, The Boys, Umbrella Academy, and Welcome to Derry, a It prequel,
Oh, okay. Not like
and
welcome to,
maybe Peacemaker season 2.
not like Dairy Girls.
No, not like Derry
Not
Girls.
Dairy Northern Ireland, but of course House of the Dragon.
House of the Dragon, and Mandalorian season 4, maybe Mandalorian season 4. Season 3 was fucking trash, so we'll see.
Yeah. All right, man. I will talk to you soon. Thank you for calling in. Thank you everybody for being with me, and I'll see you guys. See you guys later.